races are in the 1994 record book, and the AC-Delco Challenge Series competitors are cranking it up for another classic championship battle. Two-time champion Butch Miller has made an impressive return to the ASA, winning the season opener in Denver and leading on points. Mike Eddy, always a threat, bounced back into the winner's circle at Columbus and has eyes on an unprecedented 8th championship. Number 53, Scott Hansen, gave Johnny Benson Jr. a run for his money in the 1993 championship. This year he wants it all, and he wants it now. Glenn Allen Jr. leads a posse of young guns, including Souter, St. Amant, and Raines. They've seen the top of the mountain, and they're climbing up to it. Buckle up, race fans, and hang on tight. Cars have taken the grid for the Glass City 300 at Toledo Speedway here in Toledo, Ohio. With the threat of rain in the forecast and under mixed clouds and sunshine, balmy weather conditions, it's good for racing right now, but things can change in a minute here in Ohio. Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Drever, along with Rob Albright. We're getting set for what we hope will be a terrific race, and we're keeping our fingers crossed, at least with regards to the weather. For now, at least, though, Rob Albright, the patron saint of stock car racing, is smiling on us.
Well, you said it, Brian. 40 race cars on a high-bank, lightning-fast half-mile. In just a few minutes, this place will look literally like the Santa Monica Freeway at rush hour.
Well, exactly that. 40 cars will take the start, but we've got to look at some of the favorites here. Who do you like?
Well, now, if the weather conditions were different, you'd have to look at points leader Butch Miller as the odds-on favorite, or maybe even Bob Seneker. But here are two guys that historically have been slow starters, saving the best for last. This type of conditions really play into the hands of hard chargers like Mike Eddy.
Well, what about the 88 Goodwrench car, Mike Eddy? If he's going to go to the front, he's going to do it early, I would have to think.
Yes, he is, but he's going to get some pressure from a lot of guys. Scott Hansen is a charger. Glenn Allen Jr., who starts in the front row, is a charger. It's going to be a dandy.
It is going to be an exciting race. We can hardly wait to get this thing started, but before we do, we've got to check in with a third member of our broadcast team down on pit road. Here's Ralph Shaheen.
Few cars are as famous in ASA racing as the blue number 84, known as the Bluebird. 74 times this car has visited Victory Lane at an AC-Delco Challenge Series event, including right here at Toledo Speedway. 38 times it has started from the pole. It will once again today. And it has won well over $1 million of ASA money. The gentleman who drives it is none other than the sneaker, Bob Seneker. Bob, this car is very fast this weekend, but as of late, it hasn't been as dominant as years past. How come? What's new? What's different?
Well, I'm not getting any younger, but the competition certainly is, and that's what makes the difference. These young kids are just beating on the back bumper and making it tougher and tougher every year.
Bob Seneker has won at Toledo in this car, and he will start once again from the pole in the Bluebird.
Weather permitting, the Glass City 300 will be completed. In any case, we're going to have some great racing right away when we come back. The 1994 AC-Delco Challenge Series on TNN is brought to you in part by Win Oil Company, makers of quality automotive car care products. Remember, when it's wins, it works. And by Mr. Goodwrench, the GM expert at participating GM dealerships. Just like all the folks in the stands, you're going to be happy you joined us here for the Glass City 300. We're just about getting ready to start the race. In fact, we're going to go down to the infield. Doing the honors will be our man on the inside of the racetrack. Here's Ralph Shaheen.
You know, we have with us today Robert Greiner from Fort Meigs Auto Electric to help us get started here this afternoon. Roger, how about getting us underway?
On behalf of AC-Delco and Fort Meigs Auto Electric, gentlemen, start your engines.
Earning a 38th career pole position and winner here in 92, the Johnsonville Sausage Lane Automotive Thunderbird of Bob Seneca. And on the outside of row 1, he wasn't happy, but second ain't bad. Troop Motorsports Pontiac of Glenn Allen Jr.
Inside row 2, 91 winner here in Toledo, Scott Hansen from Milwaukee in the Wisconsin Aviation Chevrolet. Next to him, it's Todd Forbes from Bryan, Ohio. Runner-up in 92 in the Ramada Stolen Realty Ford.
Everyone knows the 7-time champion Mike Eddy in the GM Goodwrench HRE Pontiac. And on the outside, no practice lap, 6th qualifier, Butch Miller, points leader in the Ford Quality Care Liberty Thunderbird.
Hungry for a win, hasn't had one since 92. Tony Raines in the ETR Clean Burn Chevrolet starts inside row 4. And outside, the formidable Johnny Benson Jr., won here in 93, driving the Port City Burger Chevrolet.
The Gentle Giant starts 9th. Dennis Lampman in the Schwister Porta-John Ford Thunderbird. And the big surprise of qualifying, Ray Skillman, he'll go 10th in car number 27.
The rest of the starting grid on the 6th row, Jay Summers and Mike Miller getting his best start of the 1993 season. Row 7, Todd Oliver and Gordy Brunette. We've got a great field of competitors here. You're looking at most of them. We have a terrific field of rookies. 38 cars will actually take the start. We had a couple of them that didn't make it. Junior Hanley blew his only engine and couldn't get a replacement. Russ Gamester likewise had an engine go sour. His crew couldn't get one installed in time for the race. So it will be, in fact, 38 cars as the green flag drops. Rob Albright.
Other drivers failing to make the field. Larry said he's a legendary. He's won holds 17 track records at various locales. Finding the going tough. He won't be able to go today. Hopefully he'll come back. Greg Freed crashed hard in practice. Donnie Varco, the Canadian, had bought a car from Johnny Benson, did not make the field. And as you mentioned, Russ Gamester and Junior Hanley with mechanical problems. And there we saw Jeff Neal. Now, Jeff is running elsewhere this season. He is subbing for Dr. Yale Conley. It should be interesting at the start of this race, starting well deep in the field.
Dr. Conley qualified the car, then he had to go off for some other business. Jeff Neal is behind the wheel. Look at that front row right there. We have Bob Seneca and the Bluebird. Here's another look at those who did not qualify. And the field circles the track. We're waiting for the green flag. Up front, Bob Seneca and, well, the number 15 car did a super job of qualifying. Glenn Allen Jr. starts outside front row. And Glenn, when I talked to him, Brian, was not happy. Can you imagine? The top 20 cars separated by 0.3 of a second. The top 30 by less than half a second. And he said, boy, the thing just wouldn't turn. Well, I'll tell you what, though, that's because he's a young, aggressive guy, and sometimes second place just isn't good enough for a guy with the kind of mentality that this guy has. And we'll be looking very closely at the effort out there by Glenn Allen Jr. in that green Troop Motorsports Pontiac. Hey,
race fans, what a great crowd. Now, it's not completely full here, but pretty doggone close as we look at 300 laps, the scheduled distance, 151 laps. If we have weather problems, would constitute a complete race. As you mentioned, 39 starters. Bob Seneca on a half-mile, 109-mile-an-hour average. That means about 135 miles an hour down the straightaway. And Brian, as we discovered both yesterday in practice and in a late model race here last night, when things happen in front of you, there is simply no time to take evasive action unless your spotter is very alert, unless you're maybe half a lap away from what's happening.
Well, we did see a lot of mishaps in the race last night. We certainly hope that we don't see any here today. Either way, it's going to be great racing up front, and some guys in the middle of the pack are going to have to work their way through some extremely capable race car drivers to get there. It's also interesting that they didn't quite get the track record here in qualifying. That was set by Johnny Benson Jr. last year, a little over 110 miles an hour. They went just short of that here as Bob Seneca took the pole.
The track is a half mile, 18-degree banking in the turns, 4-degree banking on the straightaway. And if we were to look at an aerial view of this racetrack, it's actually shaped like an egg. Turns 3 and 4 much narrower than 1 and 2. That means, Brian, that the cars will work differently in each end of the racetrack. And talking to the veterans, they said you got to do a compromise chassis setup. And again, you're going to need to make that machine work on the bottom of the racetrack. And as we saw in our opening telecast, Mike Miller is a guy that can figure out how to do that. So he might be a dark horse for a win today.
We'll have to keep a close eye on the racing line here. Sometimes it changes during the course of an event. And fellows that'll race well early outside may need to tuck down inside as the race wears on, or vice versa. Either way, it's going to be an interesting race. Turn 3-4 area was where a lot of the problems happened in the late model race that we did watch last night. Kind of a warm-up event for the crowd and for us. And it should be very interesting. If they get it going around turns 1 and 2, 3 and 4 a little tighter, it'll be tough. Getting ready to go green as the field is on the backstretch, led around by the Bluebird, Bob Seneca, and Glenn Allen Jr. on the outside of the front row as they head for the starting line. We're under green as Roger Slack, our 19-year-old flagman, 7 years a veteran, gives them the flags. We're underway with the Glass City 300 here at Toledo Speedway. Coming to the end of the very first lap of green flag racing, it's still Bob Seneker hanging on to a lead. Glenn Allen Jr. already challenging on the outside as this two-line groove is working already on the inside. Scott Hansen, the number 53 car, and outside the 07 of Todd Forbes still hanging on there in the 4th spot.
We expected in the early 10 or so laps that they would file into single file order, but that's not the case. Now that time Glenn Allen, you saw him drip a little bit up out of that black part of the racetrack into the loose stuff. As a result, he's forced to give up that outside position of Bob Seneker. He now drops down right in front of Scott Hansen, who looks very racy early.
Yes, indeed. Seneker still clinging to the lead here as Glenn Allen Jr. starts to force the pace. He in turn being forced by Scott Hansen in the 53. Mike Eddy in the 88 Goodwrench black car has moved up into 4th spot, and that pushes the 07 of Todd Forbes back to 5th. The race is up front right now in the early going here. Just a couple of laps on the board, and as we complete 4, it's still Bob Seneker in the blue 84.
Butch Miller started 6th. There he is racing to the outside of Dennis Lampman's car number 9. He's working on Ray Skillman in car number 27. An interesting note, Skillman started 10th. This was his first start of the season. He started 10th, Butch started 6th. Miller is already behind him. However, we've seen this from Butch before. He lets things string out and then he starts to pick them off one at a time.
He's counting on a full 300-lap distance here, perhaps, not charging to the front early. Butch Miller and Mike Eddy each have a win in this 1994 AC-Delco Challenge Series season. This could be, I guess, the rubber match between these two as we just get underway with a very young race season.
For the last couple of seasons, Brian, as Miller now moves underneath, we've got a good race going on there for 2nd position.
Indeed, right on the outside is the Glenn Allen Jr. car, and on the inside, the number 53 of Scott Hansen. These guys ask no quarter and give none. Good door-to-door racing here on the half-mile high bank at Toledo Speedway.
I mentioned that Glenn Allen was not happy with his qualifying run. He said the car pushed. It just wouldn't turn down into the corners, and it looks like they still don't have that resolved early in the going.
Well, it's a good thing Butch Miller has a lot of experience here at Toledo Speedway, because as you mentioned at the top of the show, he only had 2 laps of practice, and those were his 2 qualifying laps. So I guess he's got to be happy with the setup on the race car, and it's just a good thing that
And Scott Hansen turns Bob Seneker around coming out of turn number 4, the pole sitter and early leader of this race, and that is something you rarely see. Several other cars colliding down in turn number 4 as they were hard on the binders. Seneker has righted that machine. You can see the carnage of what has transpired. Joe Knott in car number 48 has come to rest. The Canadian driver there, that's the black with white numeral car number 93 of Alec Pinsino. It looks like everyone may be able to get going, with perhaps the exception of Joe Knott, who has been so impressive in the early going of this 1994 campaign. And he now gets the car started with a lot of body damage.
Well, how about Bob Seneker, though? He just did a 360 and kept right on going, dropped himself right into 12th place. And as the yellow flag came out, Bob Seneker really just lost about a dozen positions, well, 10 actually, and he's right back in the race with no damage apparent. All the carnage came in his wake.
I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to look at this. Very uncharacteristic of Scott Hansen to get hard enough into the back end of another race car to turn it around. Bob Seneker can't be happy. There is the car number 53 of Hansen. Wouldn't it be interesting now to listen in on the radio conversations taking place between Scott and his crew chief, Dan Stillman, Seneker and his crew chief, and you know, you got to wonder what they're thinking. These are two guys that are normally very mild-mannered. Let's take another look at it.
Well, here it is. Watch the white 53 of Scott Hansen as he gets into the back bumper there of Bob Seneker, turns him around, pushes him out of the way, and goes right to the front. Now, Bob Seneker does the big 360 there and gets back on the gas. Only 11 cars went by, and he's in 12th spot as we go to the restart. Here's
Something I noticed as we're going to look from here, you could see that Bob Seneker was intermittently on and off the brakes on car number 84. Once he knew he was going to spin, he cranked that steering wheel hard left, and as soon as it started to slide, momentarily off the brakes, as soon as it started to right itself, back on the binders to make sure that he stayed out of the infield pit area and out of harm's way. There's some tires demarking the inside of the racetrack. And there's the new leader, and I'm sure, knowing Scott Hansen, this is not the way that he wanted to get the lead.
Aggressive driving, you can't fault him for that. Pinsino and Joe Knott trying to get repairs made. We'll be back as the Glass City 300 continues here on TNN. Don't go anywhere. You're you're just in time. The green flag has dropped just seconds. Well, right as you came back with us here, and Scott Hansen in the number 53 leads over the second place car, the 88 of Mike Eddy. The incident that caused the yellow flag, of course, was Hansen with a little bump on the back end of Bob Seneker's car. And Seneker is now pushed back into 10th or 12th place, has to race himself back up to the front. The good news is he has no damage visible on the race car. And of course, once everything happened down below there, our Ralph Shaheen took off like Carl Lewis for the Seneker pit, and this is what he found out.
Well, Brian, we had a chance to talk to Dan Crawford, who is the crew chief for Bob Seneker, and he said that Bob was a little upset about it, but not furious. He didn't exactly say it was just a good racing incident on a short track, but at the same time, he didn't say it wasn't. So Seneker has no damage to the car. It is running okay. I expect the Bluebird will be coming through the field here again. He is definitely one of the fastest cars. Now, one other car we need to keep our eye on is car number 7, Gary St. Amont's Wins machine, the Ford Thunderbird. A little bit of smoke out of the back end, and Bob Seneker's car now slows down the backstretch, so we'll go find out what's up with the Bluebird.
There was a lot of smoke as he came out of turn 4 the last time by. Things didn't sound right as he dove Brian down into turn number 1. Blue smoke everywhere, so it's got to be over for Bob Seneker, and the frustration that plagued him through much of 1993 just continues this year.
Well, he won the Hard Luck Award that was voted on by the rest of the drivers. And Seneker, of course, with a very entertaining and amusing speech at the awards banquet at the end of the 1993 season. And with a pole here today, we thought maybe his bad luck had come to an end. I guess we were a little early.
Very unfortunate. Scott Hansen, meanwhile, that you're looking at, look at the advantage that he's already built, Brian. It's about 10 car lengths over second place Mike Eddy, and Eddy goes to the front if he can, so that doesn't look all that good for Mike.
Scott Hansen already starting to work his way through traffic as he approaches the tail end of the field. He has put some distance, some serious real estate in between himself and the second place car of Mike Eddy. Here you can see David Ensball down on the inside. Glenn Allen Jr. trying to find a way around and gets into the slipstream of Mike Eddy in the black 88. These are second and third place in the racetrack right now because the white 53 of Scott Hansen, the Wisconsin Aviation Chevrolet, is gone.
And I'll tell you, this is kind of amazing. Car number 84, Bob Seneker, is back on the racetrack and appears to be running well. Maybe the sour-sounding engine did not belong to the Johnsonville sausage machine, and perhaps in skidding and spinning, he might have cut down a tire. So this could get interesting.
Well, it already looks like an elephant parade nose to tail here at the Toledo Speedway. Glenn Allen Jr. takes a look down inside of Mike Eddy and gets through on the inside. Mike Eddy now pushed up, hung out to dry there on the outside. And here is Glenn Allen Jr. taking over second place in the race behind Scott Hansen.
And hold your breath, because right behind him come two guys that have banged on each other for the last 4 seasons. Last year's champion, Johnny Benson Jr., who's vacated the ASA ranks for the South and is just going to do a handful of events this year. Still, he knows this track. He knows these race cars. He dominated this event a year ago, and he and Mike Eddy will put on a show for you in just a minute.
They've worked their way around the number 16 car of John Freeman in the Tioga Pines Chevrolet, who just lost a lap to the leaders and to the second, third, and fourth place cars. Here's Mike Eddy and Johnny Benson Jr. doing battle. Meanwhile, Glenn Allen Jr. has set sail after Scott Hansen, who is just simply flying. We got a car turned around here on the home stretch, and it looks like everybody's going to miss the number 27 car of Ray Skillman, but he's parked sideways just short of the finish line, and the field goes by under the yellow flag of Roger Slack.
Ray Skillman owns a multi-car dealership down on the south side of Indianapolis in the Greenwood area, and in Ray's defense, he's got some ability, but he runs a very limited schedule, and it's tough to come out here like he's done for the first time in '94 and get everything going your direction. Qualified extremely well, and great moves made by at least a half a dozen fellow competitors to avoid that spinning car number 27. Let's look again.
Here he comes, getting sideways right in pit row. Oh, just squeaking around there was one of the other cars. Then high on the high side, taking a little bit of debris.
Oh, Gary St. Amant, did you see that move right there? Amazing.
Great skill and talent by these drivers under conditions that would probably stop our hearts out there on our daily commute. Here once again is a look at the leader, the number 53 car, clean and white and bright. Scott Hansen, after a little bit of a move on Bob Seneker, has gone to the front and stayed there for the time being.
Well, Scott Hansen had built a significant lead just before this caution came out. However, Glenn Allen Jr. had to wrestle with Mike Eddy. Now, I'm surprised, Brian, that Eddy has chosen not to come on pit road, but Steve Holtzhausen, who'd had a good start to the 1994 season after a bad 93, has come to a halt in turn 4.
Well, let's go once again down to pit road. Ralph Shaheen is caught up with the folks that are at the center of action here, Ralph.
Boy, what a frustrating day for Bob Seneker, Brian. You know, first he gets tapped and sent around with Scott Hansen, and now as simple a problem as a loose wire on a spark plug is what forced him to come in. They lost the cylinder. He is now 2 laps down to our leaders.
Bob Seneker continues to have bad luck here in the 1994 ASA AC-Delco Challenge Series. We'll see if his luck improves when we come back. Welcome back to the Glass City 300 here in Toledo, Ohio. An action-packed race already, I think you'll agree. 31 laps in the record books. The leader, number 53, Scott Hansen. Here's the situation among the contingency program. All these cars, well, there's big bonuses at stake.
Let's begin with the newest. First, Pontiac joins the fray in 1994. If you win a race in a Pontiac, as Mike Eddy did last time out in Columbus, a $4,000 bonus, $3,000 for the second, third. Place pays $2,000, fourth $1,000. Now note there, first place money rolls over if not won by a Pontiac. So should a Pontiac driver win today, it will be a $4,000 bonus. If a Pontiac driver wins the pole and the race, an additional $4,000. Now Ford structures it a little bit differently. $8,000 is what Butch Miller won for winning the opening round in a Ford back at Colorado. $4,000 for second, $3,000 for third, and so forth. Chevrolet, they're kind of the guys on the outside looking in at this point, but that could bode very well for the current race leader, Scott Hansen, Brian, because that money rolls over. That means since a Chevy has not won a race yet, should Scott Hansen or one of the other Chevy pilots win today, $12,000 in addition to the regular prize money.
That's a lot of bucks at stake. Right now we're going to go down inside at the Baker Enterprises Pontiac pit. Here's Ralph Shaheen.
Hey, Brian, what happened to you the last time you lost your battery in your car? Well, for Steve Holzhausen, that's what happened to him. Look how badly this battery was torn up. Here's Holzhausen's car. It's just come in. You can see the big cut just in front of the rear wheel. That's where the battery is housed inside there. The car got up inside here, tore it all up, destroyed that battery. The crew brought him in. They have to take the tire off here to get inside here to change that battery. It's a timely process. They got it fixed, and now Steve Holzhausen should be going back out anytime.
Well, I was going to say it couldn't have been a Delco battery. However, you know, nothing can take a shot like that and survive.
Well, I don't think I ever had a battery die an eventful death like that. Mine just usually sort of fades into the distance about the end of winter when you really need it.
Get a Delco, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, all
Got
right.
my plug in, right?
We're getting ready to go here. The cars are still circling the track, and we have a few cars exhibiting some very obvious damage, some that are looking just fresh and brand new, notably the 53 of Scott Hansen up front, who is our leader. Glenn Allen Jr.'s green number 15 looking just as good, and the damaged cars are the ones a little bit further back, including the number 78 of Steve Holzhausen. Baker Enterprises Pontiac trying to get the battery back in place to get back out on the racetrack. We're getting set to go green, and there's the flag. Roger Slack waves it, and Scott Hansen takes it. Heading around towards the turn number 1 with Glenn Allen Jr. right behind him. And right behind the two of them, it's the number 21 of Johnny Benson Jr.
And the car got sideways on the main straightaway. Righted, it was Jeff Neal in car number 5. Let's see, Brian, if Glenn Allen can stay with Scott Hansen. It doesn't look like he's going to have any problem as he's immediately challenging for that top spot.
The yellow flag bunched him up a little bit, but there you saw Glenn Allen drifting just a little high, and maybe his comment about the car just won't turn, as he said after coming out of qualifying, could still be true. We saw Hansen duck down low on the inside, and Glenn Allen, rather, couldn't quite make his car tuck in the way Hansen's did.
It's still way too early for the leaders to be making pit stops. They won't want to give up track position. But something like a slight handling problem can be adjusted simply by stagger. In other words, using maybe a slightly larger diameter tire on the outside tends to make the car turn more to the inside. That may be the solution for Glenn Allen.
They're getting already into traffic here as Scott Hansen, Glenn Allen, and Johnny Benson Jr. in the Port City Berger Chevrolet are moving their way up into the tail end of the field. There's Carl James in the Cartwright Odessa Chevy becomes the first victim, and Scott Hansen moves smoothly around the outside.
And as they move through lap traffic, you could again see briefly Mike Eddy had moved under Johnny Benson as they ran side by side for third position. There is Todd Forbes on the outside. He's running in 5th, and right now that's the best of any Ford in this group. He finished 2nd in this race to Bob Seneker in a very exciting finish 2 years ago.
Mike Eddy is also tacked on there, the number 88 black Goodwrench car. And he is working his way through the very same traffic, has already passed most of it, and we have got some terrific side-by-side racing here. Then they single out to take the only available line through the lap traffic, and then they tuck back in again.
being a high-banked racetrack, you really don't get the visual effect. As we mentioned at the top of the show, about 130-mile-an-hour straightaway speeds. Goodyear has brought a slightly harder tire, compound tire, than they might to other facilities. Once we come out of a yellow and go back to green, for some of these cars, it takes several laps to get back up to full song in terms of getting the racing rubber heated up.
You can see sometimes as the cars dip down low on turn 1 and 2, and even here at 3 and 4, there's a little bit of a dip that causes the left side of the car to drop. It's kind of disconcerting for us watching the race, and certainly must be disconcerting for the drivers as they come around with a nice smooth line, and all of a sudden, whoa, the bottom drops out of the left side of the car.
Some heavy traffic now going around the outside of the school principal, Dave Anspaugh, car number 37. You might have just seen there was a couple of other cars that got lapped, and now we've got a battle for second position.
And once again, though, Scott Hansen is running away. He's opened up probably 5 or 6 car lengths on that second place battle by Glenn Allen and Johnny Benson. And out of the picture, but in the lead is Scott Hansen in the white 53.
Saw Johnny Benson testing the high side of the racetrack. As the afternoon progresses, we got some rain last night, but as the afternoon progresses, you'll see the groove move up.
We haven't uncrossed our fingers yet, folks. There is threatening skies up above, but right now that's in the back of our minds. And right up front is the race here between Scott Hansen and between Glenn Allen Jr. They're working their way around the 61 car of Tracy Schuler there, the Reliance Trucking Chevrolet. Traffic continues to present itself here, and as close as the field was packed in qualifying, a third of a second covering the first 20. Now there seems to be a lot of difference between these race cars.
It's amazing. It doesn't take long. We're just 46 laps into this race. Tracy Schuler, that just went a lap down, didn't make the race at Colorado as a rookie, finished 8th at Columbus, and not having a great day in the early going here.
Here's Todd Forbes in the 07 running in 5th spot, and in his rearview mirror is the formidable Butch Miller in the 52. Miller, of course, driving his characteristic patient race at least through the first 47 laps now of this Toledo Glass City 300.
5th and 6th positions. Todd Forbes, of course, won for the first time in ASA last season at I-70 Speedway in Odessa, Missouri on TNN, a track very much like this one. So he hopes to have a good run here this afternoon.
Back up front to the number 53 of Scott Hansen. Glenn Allen Jr. now is tucked through on the inside and uses a lap car to race to the front. Johnny Benson Jr. in the slipstream comes around, and just like that, blink your eye, you might miss something. And Scott Hansen is now 3rd place. A lap ago, he was leading.
Hasn't this been unusual at the start of this race? How Scott Hansen seemed to be able to pull easily away, but now that we've run 10 or 15 laps under green, Brian, he's lost the handle, and Glenn Allen has taken the point.
Alec Pinsino down on the inside, losing a lap in that aerodynamically challenged number 93. We're going to go once again down to the pit, and Ralph Shaheen. Ralph.
Well, Brian, you know, just like Rob was talking about, tires are a real big story with the ASA, and the reason why is because you never get 4 fresh ones. Because remember, in ASA competition, even under a yellow, you can only change 2 tires. That means you're always running on at least 2 used tires. Now that comes into play when the drivers are setting up the race cars. Take Mike Eddy, for example. He gets a base setup for his car, and he does it on used tires. That's what he tests on when he first comes to the racetrack. Used tires, usually 25 laps or more on a tire, so they built up some heat and they know what the tire will do. Then he picks a size on that tire and he stays with it. He makes sure that all of his tires are the same. That's the way his tires are stacked up and ready to go. That way he has a base system throughout the race to work on.
Ralph Shaheen with the inside scoop on tires here, 2 at a time. Tire changes some of these crews might like to change 4 the way these guys are running out here today, Rob.
And they are blistering this racetrack. 26 cars remain on the lead lap. Now, normally you expect to see 80% of the field remaining on the lead lap. 13 machines already a lap in arrears. And Johnny Benson Jr. proving that he still has what it takes to run up front at ASA. He was good, but not a real strong contender. And Mike Eddy has come behind the wall. Car number 88, it looks like, by nature of where he's parked that car, the day may be over for the GM Goodrich Chevrolet or Pontiac.
Just in the blink of an eye, the winner of the second race of this 1994 season, Mike Eddy, the 7-time champion, goes behind the wall and has called it a day. His crew is running over there. So is our Ralph Shaheen.
And we've got a major problem down in turn number 4. You can see that Brian Reevely sits up in the racing group. The blue and yellow car number 2 also involved. Kent Stauffer in car number 90. Brad Loney was involved, but he's driven away from that incident. and Stauffer, who had been running on the lead lap, now will lose a lap as a result. I didn't see it unfold. I'm sorry I interrupted, but boy, when something like that erupts, you've got to get to it immediately.
Well, we can't look everywhere, and we're watching one spot on the racetrack. Something else goes on someplace else. We've got pieces of cars sitting in the middle of turn number 4. Couple of cars in unusual attitudes. It looks like Ken Stauffer in the Kinetic Racing Engine Flex-Tech Ford has gotten going again. But number 2, Brian Reevely in the Gillen JB Car Care Products Chevrolet is not so fortunate. He's still parked in the middle of turn 4 like he's going to get out and go shopping.
And rookie Brian is a very interesting story. This car has previously been occupied by Gary St. Amant and Jay Sauter, several other drivers. Brian was dominant in the Indiana high-banked racetracks at Salem and Winchester. Just a kid, so to speak, 22 years old, I believe. In fact, he ran All-Pro and won his second race out. And he thought he'd come to ASA and immediately run up front. It's a little tougher, I think, than the youngster anticipated.
We told you that Ralph Shaheen was on his way to see the number 88 driver, Mike Eddy's with him.
Mike, what was the problem? Did you know it was developing a motor problem, or is it even the motor?
Well, something happened to the motor. It just happened right away. I don't know what it was.
Okay, and did it kind of indications? How do you tell when you're a driver? Any way of letting the motor tell you what could be a problem?
Well, the way I can tell with this, that it quit running, so there's anybody could have told it had a problem.
Well, that's pretty much it. Just the motor died on it.
A pass-fail system, in this case, a failed engine for the Mike Eddy number 88. And with Glenn Allen Jr. in the Troop Motorsports green number 15 leading, we're going to cut away for a minute. We'll be racing when you get back. Welcome back to the Glass City 300. Computer hardware for our electronic scoring system is provided by Gateway 2000. For more information about Gateway 2000 products, call 1-800-846-2060. It'd be a real good idea. Then you can keep track of things the way we do. Here is the situation. After 61 laps, Glenn Allen Jr. stole the lead away from Scott Hansen. He still has it ahead of Johnny Benson Jr. Butch Miller runs 4th, and here is the second half of the top 10. Tony Raines, Mike Miller, Gary St. Amant, Dennis Lampman, and Gordy Brunette.
11th position is Jay Sauter, who started well deep in the field. Rookie Jay Summers runs in 12th. 13th is rookie Roger Avance, the Colorado driver. And in 14th, yet another rookie, Brian Refner, in car number 5.
Getting ready to go green. And the leader, the green, number 15, Troop Motorsports Pontiac. Glenn Allen Jr. takes the flag. Johnny Benson Jr. and the number 21 Ford City Berger Chevrolet pushes right up to him. And these two guys ran away at the green flag from the rest of the field. Right now, Scott Hansen has got to try to work his way around one of the lap cars in the field in order to get up to these two guys.
And as Benson chases Glenn Allen Jr., both Butch Miller and Todd Forbes have closed right in on Scott Hansen. Here's the interval. You can see the gap a little less than half a straightaway, second to third.
Steve Shive in the Lincoln Steel and Supply Chevrolet, tucking down on the inside, as now the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th place cars start to come around the outside. And there's the 07 car of Todd Forbes.
Tony Raines having a good run in car number 25, the ETR machine. Tony's first career win, as you mentioned when we did the grid, was 2 years ago at Cayuga up in Canada. And look at him drop to the low side of Todd Forbes, and he's gunning for that 5th position. So Tony Raines, who started, let's take a peek here, in 7th, now begins to work his way back up into the top 5 and bringing with him a guy that you know quite well.
Guess who? Mr. Low Groove from the Denver race, number 18, Mike Miller, running in 7th spot right now. Actually, it's going to be 6th as they both go by Todd Forbes. And these two guys ride like they've got 2 tires down in the gutter there. You know how when your bowling ball runs straight? Well, these guys drop 2 tires in a way low groove and work their way right down around the inside. Maybe that low groove's starting to work for the 25 car. It certainly has been known to work for number 18, Mike Miller.
Brad Loney, who was on the lead lap, there he is in the red Winnebago car number 33, now goes a lap down. He came on pit road, apparently a cut tire under green flag conditions. And Mike Miller's biggest fan we'll like to say hi to, that's his dad, Wally Miller, who suffered a stroke. He's in St. Luke's Hospital in Jacksonville, Florida. Hey, Wally, hang in there. Your kid's doing great today. And Melvin Reeser, a big-time, long-time ASA fan who suffered a heart attack on Friday. He's doing okay. So get well, folks.
Mike Miller and the number 25, Tony Raines, working that low line. We asked Mike Miller just why his car works so well down low there. Dennis Grossnickel helps him set it up.
That might be from, I can't see as well as I used to be able to. No, the car just likes it down there. You know, what can I say? I mean, you have to drive the car where it wants to be.
It's pretty simple, isn't it? From 12th to 6th, and it likes it down there.
It's
Personality.
got a human characteristic. The car just likes it down there. I'm not sure if I'll buy that explanation, but I guess we'll have to. Whatever works, you got to go with it.
And near disaster right in front of the leaders as car number 16, John Freeman, got sideways. We saw Tony Roper running at the tail end of the lead lap, drop way low, and Glenn Allen Jr. and Johnny Benson running first and second with Butch Miller third. Also had to get very hard on the brakes. Everybody scooted through unscathed.
Glenn Allen Jr. and Johnny Benson Jr. now making their way around the number 8 car of Carl James in the Cartwright Odessa Chevrolet. They have made their way clear, and so the rest of the field still contending with the same traffic. Butch Miller, though, shoots around the outside. You just can't quite see him here, and now he sneaks into the picture in third spot, so we have definitely closed up among the first 3, maybe 4 or 5 cars at this point.
We've also just been handed a note that Jeff Neal, who started 28th in a car they had no laps in, Dr. Yale Conley's machinist moved that car to 18th, so he may become a factor.
Well, starting 38 cars on the grid and moving up to 18th for Jeff Neal. Great shot. But now we got a number 22 car down there. That's Jay Summers of the Francis Engineering Pontiac. And this is not a normal situation when you got flames coming out from under the car like those are.
And we've got trouble up in turn number 4 as we continue to take a look at Jay Summers. A car has spun. It's the 26 machine of rookie driver Bill Baird, and you can see also Roger Avant spinning to avoid the trouble, and he's dropped to the low side of the racetrack. I don't think anybody touched anything. We'll verify that shortly. But again, we'll go under caution with 75 laps completed, just a quarter of the Glass City 300.
It'll be hard to point our finger at just exactly why the yellow flag came out, because we had 3 different things going on at the same time. We had a car with some flames coming out. We had one pointing towards the fence, another one down in the grass. In any case, we are under yellow. There's a look at the number 75, Littleton, Colorado's Roger Avance, one of the candidates for the Pat Shower Memorial Rookie of the Year, and in his Albertsons All-City Madcap Chevrolet. And there's the 26 car, Bill Baird, Sturgis, Kentucky, in the Saturn Machine Gulf State Steel Chevrolet. A pair of Chevys now trying to get back into the race. And attrition beginning to take its toll, at least on the appearance of some of these cars, if not their actual ability to function.
And Bill Baird that we're looking at, car number 26, an interesting story. He was a very, very successful businessman in his mid-40s, just decided he wanted to go racing. So he turned the reins of that business over to someone else. Last year was his first full-time season, raced 131 times, just so that he would be in a position to join the major leagues of ASA racing this year.
With the yellow flag still waving, it gives us an opportunity to show you some very important messages. We'll let you know that Glenn Allen Jr. and Johnny Benson are still dueling for the lead. And when we come back, hopefully they'll be racing. Hi there. Bet you couldn't wait to get back to the Glass City 300 here in Toledo, Ohio. We've had a heck of a race so far, 78 laps in the books. We're under yellow right now. Part of the reason why the number 75 car of Roger Avance on the hook and heading for the pit.
And Roger was having a good season in car number 75, one of the leading rookie contenders. Let's see if we can figure out what happened. And I think he might have gotten tapped from behind, sends him into the inside barrier. So was I wrong when I said there wasn't any contact? That's the first view that we had. So Roger Avance damage may be repairable. Now another guy was doing a little bit of torch work on his own, car number 22, Jay Summers. He's brought that machine on pit road. I think Ralph Shaheen is there. Maybe a carburetor or a fuel problem of some sort. Ralph?
Well, Rob, you can see the whole back end of the car is pretty crispy. They jacked it up. There's nothing here on the ground. They weren't sure if they had a gas leak or an oil leak or what it could have been. He said the thing lit up on him and then it went right out. They brought the car in, filled it up with fuel, and they brought it back in to see if they could see some leaks, where it was coming from. Nothing. So maybe it was just a little spontaneous combustion.
You might want to ask him, Ralph. Sometimes that can be a sticking carburetor, and that, you know.
Well, we did check with the crew. They are absolutely dumbfounded at this point.
Interesting. Well, Jay hasn't run this season. He's been very competitive in the past, running a handful of races. Intended to run for the Pat Shower Memorial Rookie of the Year award and the $40,000, but having missed the first 2 races, it's not looking all that great here this afternoon. We'll definitely, Brian, want to keep an eye on that race car.
Well, I would guess that Pontiac Flambe was not on the menu for Jay Summers today, and he'll be keeping a close eye on that race car too, you can bet. He doesn't want to get in the hot seat in quite that way.
Glenn Allen continuing to lead in that Pontiac that he says just won't turn. The Chevrolet of Johnny Benson running second. There he is. Separating them then from the 3rd place car number 52 of Butch Miller is the lapped car number 10 of Tony Roper, who did just go a lap down. He was forced on pit road in this last caution, and we're, looks like, ready to go back to green.
Glenn Allen Jr., I think it would be pretty scary if we ever talked to Glenn and he said, yeah, the car's working great. He's leading with a car that he doesn't like. At least that's what he said. Wouldn't turn. Well, I beg to differ with him at this point. The green flag is waving by Roger Slack very quickly. Butch Miller moves around the number 10 car of Tony Roper and heads for the front. Glenn Allen Jr. and Johnny Benson Jr., a pair of juniors running up there. One of them running in second spot right now, of course, the 1993 season champion. And he has made a couple of appearances already here in ASA Racing.
Certainly has. Butch Miller runs 4th, Tony Raines 5th, 6th is Mike Miller, 7th Gary St. Amant, and in 8th position, car number 1, Jay Sauter.
There is the 21 car of Johnny Benson Jr., separated by a couple of car lengths there from Glenn Allen Jr. These two guys running up front here, 83 laps in the books. And hopefully we will proceed without further incident, but judged on what has happened here so far, that's unlikely. A tricky racetrack that some of these guys are finding an easier way to get around than others.
What an interesting set of circumstances for these two front runners. Glenn Allen Jr. now has Chris Bradley as his crew chief, who turned the wrenches for Benson in his championship year last year. Glenn Allen Jr. runs for Troop Motorsports, who gave Johnny Benson his Rookie of the Year ride back in 1990.
We see Johnny Benson Jr. crawling around under the car a lot himself, and so he seems to be the de facto crew chief of his operation when he comes ASA Racing.
Glenn does too, but you know where Glenn learned his lessons? From the chassis master, Butch Miller. As a 16-year-old rookie coming to ASA, he was the literal accident looking for a place to happen, but he's turned into one of the smoothest, steadiest drivers on this circuit.
Chassis in these ASA cars are basically, well, at least they start out all the same. The center sections of every race car are made by the same vendor, and then each team gets to add their own front, rear end, and all the parts and accoutrements that go along with it. Some of them buy ready-made chassis from a couple of vendors, and others, like Bob Seneker and Mike Miller, who we've mentioned before, build their own virtually from scratch. So there's a lot of variation in the way these race cars are put together. The end result, hopefully for all of them, is pretty much the same. A car that'll handle well around these many different tracks that they race on.
And the one that's not handling as well as it did at the outset is that white car number 53 of Scott Hansen. You can see when he comes off turn number 4, not so much that time, but on the previous lap, tail end moving out just a little bit. He's got a little bit of a loose condition with that race car, and Tony Raines is there to challenge. Scott will want a caution, but he won't come on pit road, Brian, until the other cars in that lead group do.
The pit selection here and the situation in the pits, it's an oval within an oval. And the defending champion of the race got first choice on pits. Then they went right down through qualifying and asked everybody else where they wanted to be. And it's kind of interesting how they have selected the different pit locations here, the various drivers and teams.
And for the moment, Tony Raines' challenge for that 4th position has subsided only slightly as the leaders once again have moved into some lap traffic. And there's Butch Miller as he still runs in that 3rd position behind car number 21, Johnny Benson, and the leader, Glenn Allen Jr.
Glenn Allen Jr. and Johnny Benson Jr. shadowing each other. Well, Benson is hiding in the shadow of Glenn Allen Jr. there. The two of them are driving around the racetrack locked in tandem. They are starting to move into the back end of the field once again and will have to contend with traffic. We saw both of these guys use traffic to their advantage in getting around Scott Hansen, or getting up to him and eventually getting around him. We'll have to watch what they do here.
Not only are they junior, but they're also juniors of very talented racing fathers. Glenn Allen Sr., who is, I believe, is or was the mayor of a small town near Cincinnati, Ohio, was a talented stock car racer himself, and Johnny Benson's dad was legendary in Michigan. There's Jeff Neal. That's car number 3, the Simonton Windows Chevrolet. It was qualified by Dr. Yale Conley. Jeff is an experienced pilot, and what's interesting about this, that car number 5 of rookie Brian Reffner, that's the machine that Jeff Neal vacated this year.
It's like musical chairs here in the AC-Delco Challenge Series. And the chair that everybody wants to be in is the front row seat right now. Glenn Allen Jr. and Johnny Benson Jr. dueling up front as we watch a great bit of racing here and a little bit of loosey-goosey goings-on in the number 3 car there of Jeff Neal.
You kind of have to wonder, too, if car owner Don Finetti of Brian Reffner's machine said, don't let that guy get by you, because he was my driver before. You're the one of today. Brian Reffner's going to be good. And Jeff Neal is again trying to work the outside line. He's got car number 44, that's Pat Bordeaux, right behind him. They remain on the lead lap, but car number 90, Kent Stauffer, is a lapped automobile. Tom Jones remains in the lead lap. So that's a good battle for position back in the pack.
A lot of different drivers on different laps working their way through traffic, a race within a race. We're trying to keep track of all of it for you here as we take a look at Jeff Neal, who has now made a successful move around the outside. And here's some of the lowdown on Kent Stauffer in the number 90 car.
Yeah, he finished second at Anderson Speedway, finished second at Flint, Michigan 2 years ago. He really wanted to win this race today. He's a former track champion of Toledo Speedway. He watched fellow veterans Dennis Lampman and Tom Jones win for the first time last year. Really needs a win and is very deserving of one, Brian. He's a good shoe.
Well, he's in a crowd right now. There he is, in the number 90 Kinetic Racing Engine Flex-Tech Thunderbird. Around the outside goes number 48 Joe Knott. And a train of cars here now as the number 90 has gotten itself tucked down on the inside, maybe not quite where he wants to be at this very moment. Now he finds a train and pulls out in the passing lane himself.
We're looking at one section of the racetrack, but there literally is not any place on this race course, Brian, that does not have action. I'd hate to be the guy in the truck deciding which part of this course to show.
We've got our heads on a swivel up here, watching everything we can. Glenn Allen Jr. has put some serious ground in between himself and Johnny Benson as we at least mention the race going on up front while we watch a lot of the action here in the middle of the pack. There is the number 81 car of Harold Fair, who's not having a great weekend.
Not a bad day right now, though. He remains on the top in the lead lap and in the top 15. He's battling momentarily with rookie driver Todd Oliver in car number 29. Works for K as an executive with K&K Insurance, so he insures him, then he drives him. Harold Fair is suffering from a burned foot this weekend, and Brian Reffner's got a problem. He's going to bring out a caution. It looks like he's made contact with someone. We didn't see it, and he may have cut down a left front tire, but that Ford Thunderbird will definitely need to come on pit road, and I wouldn't be surprised at the 102 lap mark of this race that most of the leaders will probably be in this time.
Well, we'll see if you're right. Certainly the number 5 car of Reffner is going to go to the pits. He's got some problems to deal with. He's hustling around the racetrack trying to get there as quick as he can. The pace car has come out in front of Glenn Allen Jr. This is going to bunch things up at the very least. And we'll see what the developments are down as number 5, Brian Reffner, in the structural transport Ford Thunderbird heads for the infield and pit road.
And it does appear, Brian, that Scott Hansen and Gary St. Amant will come on pit road. Staying out, apparently, will be Glenn Allen Jr., Johnny Benson. Butch Miller looks like he's going to stay out on the racetrack. And behind them is the car number 25, Tony Raines, and he's non-committal. He's kind of running in the middle of the racetrack.
There's the white 53 at the front of the parade right now. And Scott Hansen heads down the finish straightaway as they cross the start-finish line. They'll work their way into the oval within an oval. St. Amant follows him. The number 1 car of Jay Sauter goes in there with him too, and it looks like just about everybody went in. Well, let's just say a good handful, a representative handful of cars went in, not including Glenn Allen Jr. Let's go down to Ralph on pit road. He's got the inside.
Well, while Hansen's crew changes his right side tires, Kent Stauffer will do the same. Most of the leaders were saying they were going to hold on to lap 150. Hansen pulls away with a full fuel load and new tires. Jay Sauter is in. Most of the drivers, of course, will take right side tires. Those are the side of the car that takes the most abuse. Most of the cars are loose, so of course they will be playing with stagger, but what's really compounding the problem here today is due to some of these earlier incidents, we've got a lot of fluids on the racetrack as well, ranging from water and oil to maybe even some battery acid that could have been floating around after the incident with Steve Holzhausen. So the track has gotten very slippery. So this is the time where we're seeing the drivers who are best on used tires.
The pride of Grand Rapids, Michigan, Glenn Allen Jr. leads the race, 105 laps in the record book of the Toledo Glass City 300. We'll be right back. The 1994 AC-Delco Challenge Series on TNN is brought to you in part by Win Oil Company, makers of quality automotive car care products. Remember, when it's wins, it works. And by Mr. Goodwrench, the GM expert at participating GM dealerships. Things are pretty much as they were when we left you. Glenn Allen Jr. continues to lead under yellow. About the only development was that Gary St. Amant, for reasons as yet unknown to us, headed down onto pit road and went down a lap. Rob Albright, any thoughts?
Not really. I know Ralph Shaheen was there. He was headed out of the pits, and suddenly they stopped him, jacked the left side of the car up, made some repairs, and out he goes. So he is in competition, but unfortunately for Gary, that much sought first win of the 1994 season will not come here at Toledo.
It may be too soon to say. Only 108 laps of 300 have been completed. The green flag has dropped once again. Glenn Allen Jr. with one lapped car in between himself and Johnny Benson Jr. heading around the racetrack. just like nothing ever happened. This guy is riding on rails out there today in a car, as we keep joking about, he says won't turn.
Yeah, we do that a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, Chris Bradley's got that car going very well. And rookie Todd Oliver has come on pit road. He had been on the lead lap. Now, if you just joined us and you're not hearing or seeing the familiar black Pontiac car number 88, Mike Eddy was one of the first cars out of the race with an engine problem. And this is the kind of season with the points so close that you can't afford to drop out of races. That's what Glenn Allen told me. He said, we've got to finish. He said, that's the one thing I learned from my mentor, Butch Miller, who is now chasing the youngster.
Well, let's get to the bottom of the story on the number 7 car of Gary St. Amant. The wins extend forward. Ralph Shaheen is down there with Bud St. Amant. Ralph?
Well, Bud is, of course, not only the father, but the crew chief for his son, Gary. What's wrong with the car, Bud?
The reverse lever come off of the transmission and it fell down. When we jacked it up and changed the tires, when we let it down, it knocked it back in reverse, and it was also in fourth.
So how is he running now? Did you get it back where he can use all the gears, or is he just stuck in top gear?
Yeah, we just got it in fourth gear, and that's all he's got.
Well, that means he'll need some pushes out of the pits, gentlemen, but once he gets going, he'll have it up to speed.
Gary St. Amant can't use 2 gears at once, especially if one of them's reverse, so they have disengaged reverse. That is going to make, as Ralph says, difficulty in getting out of the pits. Starting out in 4th gear and trying not to bog that engine down. The crew is going to get a workout pushing him out of the pit when he comes in again, if he does.
Continue to watch Gary St. Amant. Glenn Allen Jr., meanwhile, has moved well out in front of Johnny Benson Jr. One of the best battles on the racetrack is for 3rd, 4th, and 5th positions, that being between Butch Miller, Mike Miller, and car number 25, Tony Raines.
Tony Raines is a Miller sandwich right now between Butch and Mike. Butch running in 3rd spot there, and the number 25 car of Tony Raines, the ETR Cleanburn Chevrolet blue and white. Then it's the orange number 18 of Mike Miller. Those 3 guys have got a heck of a race going on right now. Behind this man, Glenn Allen Jr. in the green number 15 continues to lead, a lead that he took, well, some time ago and seems very reluctant to relinquish.
Looking at the 7th place car, that is Dave Sensiba in car number 4, the Lane Automotive Machine, in 7th position. And he was fastest in practice yesterday, Brian, but had to take a rather deep starting position in this field, back in the 20s somewhere. He came into this year as the leading contender for Rookie of the Year, but is finally now showing some of that promise that so many people held for him this season. Meanwhile, Dennis Lampman has come on pit road in car number 9.
Down on the pit road there, number 9, Dennis Lampman, who earned his first victory in the final race of the 1993 season. And what a great surprise that was for the rest of the field, and they all were so supportive of him. He's now in there with the hood up. That is not a good sign, and the entire crew is starting to peek around in there. They're not admiring the work they did setting up this car this morning. They're trying to find something wrong with that car.
And Dennis had not been off to a particularly good start this year. Finished 22nd in Colorado, 13th at Columbus 2 weeks ago, and he will not have a strong finish here again today. He was 7th in the points last year. There's a little bit of information about the gentle giant. Best finish, obviously, a win at Berlin last year after 20 races in a row at that racetrack in Grand Rapids with Michigan winners. This Wisconsin guy cracked the checkered flag. So I see why we call him the gentle giant. He is a giant, and he is quite a gentleman.
He's one of the first men that I met as I made my entree into this sport, into ASA AC-Delco Challenge Series racing, and a more supportive and amiable fellow you will not find, and also a very skilled race car driver. There's a little spin over on the backstretch. Joey Knott out of Columbus, Ohio, takes his car for a little tour of the infield, unscheduled, I might add, and gets right back out on the racetrack. Doesn't look like anything serious, but enough to bring out the yellow flag in the hand of Roger Slack. Everybody slows it on down, and there's the man responsible for the caution.
And now we'll have to kind of question the decisions that are made by the crew chiefs of the cars that have not come on pit road as we continue to watch Joe Knott. Maybe we can see what happened. Weather we haven't talked about for a while may still be a factor. Knott, I'm not sure he made contact with anybody. And look at him, he's down in the grass, and it's really hard to get traction. He's pedaling for all it's worth to trying to get it back on the pavement.
Looks like he just made an unscheduled slight left turn, ended up in the grass, and then thought better of it and went back up on the racetrack. It certainly was not that simple, but that's all the evidence we have to go on right now is Joe Knott's car number 48 missing the right front fender. I think it has been for a while, so that is not a recent development on the aerodynamic instability of the number 48 car.
And Joe Knott, part of an outstanding rookie class of 1992 that saw Steve Holzhausen win Rookie of the Year. Also rookies that year were Tony Roper and Brad Loney. Now those 4 drivers had a terrible collective 1993, all out of the top 15 in points. Now, they came into this race clustered in the top, at the bottom, I should say, of the top 10, but none of the 4 having a good day today. That guy, however, has had a great day thus far.
He's having a very good day so far with 123 laps in the record book. We want to let you know our motorhome facilities for Group 5 sports and for the AC-Delco Challenge Series are provided by Winnebago Industries. We're certainly happy about that. And for more information, you should call them at 1-800-643-4892. Life can be good for you, too.
And that Winnebago was so nice. I don't know about you, but I almost dozed off at our early morning production meeting yesterday.
It's comfy, that's for sure, folks. Trust us. We're telling you about it. You go find out for yourselves. Glenn Allen Jr., Johnny Benson Jr., Butch Miller, and the number 25 car of Tony Raines are the front 4, followed closely by Mike Miller. Well, everybody's close in line right now. The 33 car of Brad Loney tucked in behind Mike Miller. Then we've got a mix of cars on the lead lap and those who are not.
We continue to watch the skies to the west, Brian. Just about the time I think the blackness is closing in, the sun will peek its head between the clouds as it's doing right now. And I'm sure that that has an impact on who's running well at what given point in time, because the track surface itself can vary in temperature 20 to 30 degrees or more when it's overcast versus when it's sun shining. So a car that works well when it's overcast may not be all that great when the sun pops through.
I'm kind of a one day at a time kind of guy, but for those of you that plan your lives and don't just take it as it comes, here's the next one, the Pontiac Excitement 300. That's on June 26th in Brainerd, Minnesota, 2 p.m. right here live on TNN. We definitely want you to join us for that. Road course racing in the ASA.
Not only that, but there's been a little bit of bad blood between a couple of guys, Ken Schrader and Jimmy Spencer this year. Don't miss that race. They'll both be in it.
We'll look forward to that as we look forward to the remaining 175 laps or more. Remember, we don't finish under yellow here in the AC-Delco Challenge Series. We go under green. That's where we're at right now. Green flag drops. The green 15 still leading. Red number 21, Johnny Benson Jr. challenging in second, and Butch Miller third in the 52 car.
Trying to, as you watch this battle for the lead, kind of go back through it a little bit. Tony Raines fourth, Mike Miller is fifth. In sixth position is now Dave Sensiva, the rookie, in car number 4. Running in seventh spot is Jeff Neal in car number 3 from way deep in the field, 37th at the start. Behind Jeff Neal, car number 22, Jay Summers, the flaming car of earlier, still hanging in there. Behind him, also on the lead lap, Scott Hansen. Jay Sauter runs in 11th position. Todd Forbes, 12th in 07. 13th, Tom Jones in 0. 14th, rookie Pat Bordeaux, car number 44. 14th rather, is car number 71, A.J. Cooper. And those are the cars that remain on the lead lap. There's Jay Sauter in car number 1. Remember, he and Scott Hansen, the machine directly in front of him, Brian, came on pit road during an earlier caution, and they now really have to be careful as they tiptoe through traffic.
Buried in the bunch, working their way through carefully but quickly, because the race up front is not going to wait for them. These guys aren't going to pull over and have a soda, wait for those guys to get back up there to them. There's the number 1 car, a real good look at Jay Sauter from West Salem, Wisconsin, in the KC Motorsports Pontiac.
Goes to the high side of rookie driver Steve Shive. Missed the show at Colorado, came back and was impressive at Columbus. Just making an ASA race anymore, you've got to be impressed with that.
There's Scott Hansen in the 53. There's back to the leaders now, the number 15 car of Glenn Allen Jr. Very familiar. And those of you that can't recognize that car by now, well, you've been dozing off yourself out there in TV land, folks. And the number 21 car of Johnny Benson Jr., the 93 season champion, continuing to try to challenge in there for second spot. Johnny Benson driving a pretty patient race. If he's trying to pass Glenn Allen, we really haven't seen an aggressive move to do so yet.
It has seemed that Benson Chevrolet runs best right out of a caution, and that as we go under green for a while, that Glenn Allen's car works better once the tires get heated up. So he now will drive very defensively, mirror driving they call it, and try to keep his arch rival behind him in second position.
What that's doing, though, is allow Butch Miller to close the gap. He works his way right up, maybe a car length off the rear deck of the 2 leaders there, specifically Johnny Benson Jr. We've got a 3-car race, and just like that in turn, and down in turn number 4, we've got an incident, as these guys will find it very quickly as they are heading around the turn 3 area. There is the melee, and well, let's see just exactly what happened. I believe the 44 car of Pat Bordeaux was the first one to go around in a circle there, and now we got cars heading every which way.
It looked like to me that Pat Bordeaux tangled with Carl James in car number 8. I'm sure we'll get another chance to look at it. Tony Roper, who has just been beaten on and banged to death in car number 10, has come to a stop down in turn number 4. And Alec Pinsino, we've seen him minus the front end of that race car earlier today. He also re-involved, and again this happened right in front of the leaders who were closing on a cluster of cars to put them yet another lap down. And I think Tony Roper, who has had a great start to 1994, that looks pretty terminal to me for the afternoon. Larry, you tell me what happened.
Well, all I saw was the 44 car getting sideways, and then all kinds of stuff is going on. The 44 car is down to the far right of the screen. Here comes Roper's number 10. The 98 car crossways is Gordy Brunette. Doesn't look like he hit anything. Well, doesn't look like he hit much. There's Pinsino's car that's already minus the whole front end. So things are definitely a little bit confused here in the turn 4 area. And as you said, it happened just in front of the leaders. Another look, folks. You figure it out.
I'll tell you, we've got some of the best production people and camera people in the business, but it's awfully difficult when you've got action all the way around the racetrack to catch everything. And it did look like, again, I was looking for car colors, that Carl James in car number 8 and Pat Bordeaux in car number 44 both spun. They got together and spun, and everyone was collected behind them.
It looked as though the number 10 car there of Tony Roper collected one of the big tires that they have protecting the fence there. And he's sitting in the car. His day is certainly going to be over. He had brought a damaged race car back out onto the track after a couple of earlier incidents.
And the leaders are coming on pit road. Glenn Allen Jr., Johnny Benson, car number 52, Butch Miller, choosing this time to come in as we're very near the halfway point. 137 laps completed. Cars that stopped earlier remain on the racetrack, and Ralph is on pit road.
What's really interesting here is that Benson is changing left side tires while Glenn Allen Jr. changes right side tires. Now, one reason why they took this opportunity, especially for Benson, is remember, he doesn't have a regular pit crew because he only runs a few of our ASA shows. So they wanted to take advantage of the yellow. But what a masterful job done by this crew. They beat everybody back out of the pits.
And I'll tell you, the crew, by their reaction, you'd think they just won the race, Ralph. They were jubilant.
We'll continue with the Glass City 300. Lots of stuff going on. You don't want to go very far away, and we'll be right here when you come back. The ASA AC-Delco Challenge Series continues with the Glass City 300, 140 laps in the record book. Miss Wynn's on hand with us here today. Of course, Wynn's one of our sponsors, and their representative, easy on the eyes, sitting in the grandstand along with everybody else. We look out onto the racetrack. We're still under yellow. A few cars in the pit. They're certainly taking the number 10 car back behind the wall. Tony Roper's day is over. Here's the number 25 car of Tony Raines, an ETR Cleanburn Chevrolet, circling the pit. Johnny Benson Jr. right behind him is Mike Miller. Let's go down to the pit. Ralph Shaheen has some comments on tire changes by the contenders.
Brian, as you know, in ASA racing, everybody runs the same tire. By that, I mean Goodyear brings 1 or 2 tires that you get to choose from. The one that most of the teams are running with today is a 2081. Now, that interesting thing here is here's where the crew chiefs have played their little strategy game. Dan Gibbs of Johnny Benson Jr.'s crew says the right side tires are fine. The 2081 can take a lot of abuse. He's not worried about it. He changed lefts to tighten up the car. Chris Bradley, crew chief for Glenn Allen Jr., says, no, I don't think so. Got to change right side tires. That's the side of the car that takes the most loading. He says if we go all the way green from here, I think they'll run out of right sides.
However, Glenn Allen got a very poor start as the green waves once again for leader. Tony Raines has been in the top 5, but Glenn Allen, a very poor pit stop, came out 11th. He was right behind Benson. Benson came out in 7th position. Glenn's got to hustle.
Right behind Johnny Benson Jr. is Mike Miller, and they're pitted on opposite ends of pit road. Interesting pit selection situation. We may get to the bottom of that a little later on. There's Johnny Benson working his way around the number 44 car of Pat Bordeaux, who seemed to have been the first car spinning that caused this yellow. Now we're back under green, of course. Johnny Benson Jr. out there. The leader, though, is the number 25 car of Tony Raines, who didn't come in.
Bordeaux does remain on the lead lap now in that 8th position in car number 44, but not for long, as Mike Miller takes the fresher tired Pontiac to the low side and picks up a position. So does Jay Sauter in car number 1 as these drivers begin to work their way back to the front as they chase Tony Raines.
Who are the 2 famous football players? One was called Mr. Inside, one Mr. Outside. I think we're going to have to call Mike Miller Mr. Inside. He sure uses that low side part of the track to his advantage here as he chases Johnny Benson Jr. through traffic to get up to the front, and the number 25 car of Tony Raines out of Big River, PA.
Call that camera on the wall the speed shot. You can see car number 16, John Freeman, is slowed down, trying to coast around to the pits. May or may not make it. If he does not, we'll see yet another caution flag. Tony Raines, meanwhile, as we take a look at John Freeman's Tioga Pines Chevrolet, has built a slight advantage. It's now grown to about half a straightaway over the second place car number 53 of Scott Hansen. And it does look like, or I thought, that Freeman was going to be able to make it to the infield on pit road, but he's going to come to a stop right at the start-finish line, and no doubt we will see yet another caution.
Tony Raines and the number 25 car leading right now, but with the number 16 of John Freeman parked right in victory circle about 153 laps too soon. We are going indeed to see the yellow flag come out. Roger Slack gives the yellow flag. The yellow lights come on. Tony Raines had worked his way out to a little bit of a lead, and now the field will bunch up again. Here's what's going on out there. Here's what went on, I should say, to cause part of this caution situation. There's a little bump on the outside there as Mike Miller, Mr. Inside. Johnny Benson Jr., Mr. Outside, gets the worst of it.
And they were all running for position. The guy leading that group at that point was rookie or second-year driver, car number 71, A.J. Cooper. Here's some more bumping. These guys not on the lead lap. Dennis Lampman, in fact, getting the left side tires right down in the grass, picking up a spot, making his way past Ray Skillman's car number 27.
Gave him a little smooch on the way by there with the fender.
Is that what you call that?
Here's the number 16 car getting pushed into the pit, so there is trouble brewing for John Freeman in the Tioga Pines Chevrolet. We're going to take another cutaway here from the action, or rather the inaction of a yellow flag at the moment. We hope to be racing under green when we get back. Welcome back to the Glass City 300. A little bit happened while you were away, namely number 25, the leader as we went to break. Tony Raines in the ETR Cleanburn Chevrolet went into the pit. He is no longer the leader then, and instead it is the number 53 car of Scott Hansen.
And in fact, Tony Raines has gone from the point to 14th, the last car on the lead lap. Here's the running order. Scott Hansen is in front. Jay Sauter, who's just been hanging in just outside the top 5 most of the day, runs second. Johnny Benson Jr. third. Pat Bordeaux fourth. Butch Miller came in for a second pit stop on successive cautions. A great stop. He's fifth. Glenn Allen Jr.'s crew redeemed himself after a rather poor stop the previous time. He's running in sixth. Mike Miller seventh. Car number 07, Todd Forbes eighth. Ninth is Jay Summers, car number 22. A fellow rookie, Dave Sensipa, runs 10th in car number 4. 11th is the 0 of Tom Jones. In 12th position, having a great day, is A.J. Cooper in car number 71. 13th in the borrowed ride, Jeff Neal, car number 3. And in 14th is Tony Raines. Those are the guys really with a still with a shot at the win this afternoon as we've reached the halfway point.
Rob Albright, you are an amazing human being to have all that
information. Well, thank you. My wife says that occasionally.
Right at his fingertips, folks. We come back from break, and you know who the top 14 cars are right now, right along with us. Scott Hansen, number 53. I figured that part out. Wisconsin Aviation Chevrolet. It's interesting how the race has unfolded for Scott Hansen as he bumped his way to the lead and then started drifting back. He had some problems, comes back, and here he is leading again.
And he's got a great opportunity to really ply the advantage here, Brian, as he's way ahead of the second place car, Jay Sauter. There's about 9 cars separating them on the racetrack.
So look for the number 1 of Jay Sauter. That's the second place car behind this man. Scott Hansen in the white 53. Wisconsin Aviation Chevrolet leading the race right now as we go back under green. 155 laps completed out of 300 scheduled here in the Glass City 300.
And Tony Raines is off the pace. Car number 25 is now a lap down. He's picking up the pace again, but Scott Hansen, the leader, has gotten by. What a disappointment. Tony Raines had been so strong all day, and it looks like, based on the fact that he's now pretty much up to speed, I would guess it very well could be an ignition problem for car number 25. I'm sure Ralph will be Johnny on the spot to the crew, and he'll have a report for us shortly. Meanwhile, Scott Hansen is battling with a couple of lapped cars. The pole sitter, Bob Seneca, and Gary St. Amant in 7th.
We can always count on Ralph Shaheen to head for the story. He certainly is on his way. Here is the mid-race recap. The leader was Tony Raines, who has now experienced some difficulty and headed back through the field there. We have had 3 lead changes among 4 different drivers. Hopefully you've been able to keep track of all of that along with us. 8 cautions. The most recent one came out just a moment ago, but we are back under green with number 53, Scott Hansen, leading, tailing behind the number 84, pole sitter Bob Seneca in the Bluebird. And just as we expected, we are going to go down in the pit row. Ralph Shaheen has got the story. Ralph?
Well, I got Ernie Roselli with me, who's car owner and crew chief for Tony Raines. He slowed down. How come?
We first thing, we stayed out to try to pick up the halfway money, which was a bad move because you got to run 5 laps under green. He went out on stickers instead of scuffs, and I don't know. He didn't let us know exactly what happened. He got bumped over in turn 3, and We don't know.
Well, you know, Rob, one of the things the drivers were saying is that those sticker tires are a lot slipperier than the scuff tires, so maybe that's why Tony Raines slowed down briefly.
Very well could be. He slowed rather dramatically. He wasn't just a little off the pace, he was a lot off the pace. And Scott Hansen won the Wins Halfway Challenge here this afternoon because, as Ernie Roselli alluded, you've got to go 5 laps under green to win it. What do you want to bet, Brian, that Scott Hansen, as we take a look again at the winner of the Wins Halfway Challenge, Scott Hansen in car number 53, what do you want to bet now as he tries to put another lap on Bob Seneker? He will do it very gingerly.
Well, as little as we've worked together, Rob Albright, I think about all I'm going to risk is maybe a bozo button and a free balloon. I'm not betting against you. You've got this thing figured out.
Wait a minute, I don't sign your paycheck. You don't have to be that nice to me. Say what you really think.
That's the truth, folks. It's just the way it is here in ASA AC-Delco Challenge Series Racing. Rob Albright, the man who knows all and shares everything he knows with you. Right now, Scott Hansen, I keep track of the simple stuff, and that is that Scott Hansen is our leader in the white 53. He picked up the Wins Halfway Challenge, a tactical error that Ernie Roselli admitted to there by Tony Raines, who stayed out in hopes of picking up that money. And instead, he has picked up about halfway back in the pack and has got a lot of racing to get up front again.
Well, Scott Hansen sandwiched between lap cars, but they're fast lap cars, which means that even though he is between Bob Seneker and Gary St. Amant, he's built about a full straightaway advantage over the second place car. You didn't even see him in the frame. You're looking at another couple of lapped automobiles. Dennis Lampman and car number 81, Harold Fair. Somewhere to the left of that shot is the second place car, who is Jay Sauter, but Jay just barely ahead of car number 21, Johnny Benson, who has slightly fresher tires.
Harold Fair and the number 9 car of Dennis Lampman dueling it out there in the middle of the bunch. Second place is, as you said, Jay Sauter, and right on cue, the crew in the truck gives us a picture of the second and third place battle right now as Jay Sauter goes after it with Johnny Benson Jr. working their way around the 27 car of Ray Skillman. And one of them gets by, 2 of them get by. Well, Johnny Benson hesitated there just for a moment, but now they've hooked up and gone on past. Heading out there towards the leader, Scott Hansen. This is something that we've seen before. They were chasing Scott Hansen earlier in this race.
And now they're a straightaway behind. Now that they have nobody to contend with, let's see what happens. Interesting note from that little bit that we watched there, Brian. Jay Sauter was very cautious when he made his way around the lap car of Ray Skillman. It's definitely a two-groove racetrack, but as Ralph has said, with so much fluid deposited on the racetrack, you get a little bit out of the racing groove itself, and you can go sailing into the outside retaining wall.
We'll keep an eye right here on Jay Sauter and Johnny Benson Jr. running second and third right now. Scott Hansen is our leader. There's a lot of good racing going on behind these guys, too, as they try to sort themselves out now after some went in, some didn't. Some had good pit stops, some didn't. And things are going to have to settle their way out. We've got 170 laps in the record book right now. 130 remain on this half-mile oval here in Toledo, the Toledo Speedway, home of the Glass City 300, our first visit to the Speedway in some years.
And as we watch this raging battle for second position, the guy by himself and on the roll is Glenn Allen Jr. He's moved up to 4th in car number 15. He's gotten around Butch Miller, and he brought with him a rookie driver, Pat Bordeaux, in car number 44. And you saw briefly, all too briefly, the view that the fans in the main grandstand get to see with our fan cam. And it just gives you some idea of how fast these race cars go by the start-finish line. It's really hard to tell. It is when you're watching TV. It's 130 or so miles an hour down this straightaway that's not as long as a football field.
They average just under 110 miles an hour around this half-mile track in qualifying. Johnny Benson Jr. set the track record at 110.15 miles an hour in October of 1993. And it takes 16.34 seconds to get around this racetrack, folks. If you're going to set the lap record, you've got to beat that.
And again, Benson looking to the pass, and he does it on the inside. He was working high, and finally just kind of faked him out and went down low.
Fake right, go left. It worked. And now Jay Sauter's looking at the back bumper of the red and white number 21.
And there's no rest for Jay Sauter. Look who's right behind him. It's the green and blue number 15 of Glenn Allen Jr., who has reeled these guys in very, very rapidly.
Glenn Allen Jr. has got the car that doesn't turn so good, in his own words, hooked up again, and he's heading up there. He's pushing Jay Sauter hard and trying to get around him because Johnny Benson Jr. has set sail for the leader, number 53, Scott Hansen.
And it looks like Glenn may have the advantage going into turn number 3. These guys are real competitors. They're Chargers, but they give each other plenty of racing room. I think Jay knew that he wasn't going to hold Glenn off for long, so he might as well let him get by and jeopardize neither of them. And what could have happened there could have been disastrous.
Either that or he's going to have to go back to the drawing board and try to figure out how to make his car work as well as the number 15 of Glenn Allen Jr. The True Motorsports Pontiac has got things working extremely well. Things are going in a big, big way in the direction of Glenn Allen Jr. right now. He is chasing Johnny Benson Jr. We've seen those two guys dueling throughout the race. They were chasing a different leader, however. This time it's number 53, Scott Hansen, who's tucked in the middle of a lot of traffic and finding the going a bit rough.
In 1993, Glenn Allen Jr. drove a Ford-powered automobile, and they just never got that quite working the way they wanted. They're back to their more familiar. Troop Motorsports has always run GM products, and they're back at home with Pontiac and doing very, very well this season.
180 laps gone as we head towards the 2/3 mark in this Glass City 300. There is Bob Seneker just ahead of the leader, 53 of Scott Hansen.
In heavy traffic, by the way. There's at least 8 or 10 cars directly in front of the leader, Scott Hansen.
There's Tony Raines, the number 25 car is behind the wall. That's not a good sign at all. And that was a man who was leading the race here at the halfway point. And let's go down to Ralph Shaheen for more.
Brian, you can see the smoke pouring out of the motor. Tony, what is it that finally put you out here today?
Well, I'll tell you what. Engine failure follows me like my last name. I can't get away from it. I think we broke a spring and no sense in running until it breaks, so we just give up.
Frustrating day for Tony Raines.
It is a frustrating day for Tony Raines. Started 17th, finished 20th at Colorado, finished 18th in the Buckeye 300. His last race win came back in 1992 in Canada.
Well, there's some debris on the track for real, folks, and we have a yellow flag flying out there right now. Of course, that gives us an opportunity to take a breath. They won't be long, though. We'll be right back racing. You stay with us. It has 185 laps completed out of 300 scheduled. And we're going to go down once again for some inside information. Here's Ralph Shaheen down on pit road.
Brian, the reason why we're showing you David Anspaugh's pit stop is because we wanted you to see how difficult it is to fuel the car when they're pitted on the outside of this inside pit lane. See how they're basically trying to pour the gas uphill because the gas intake is on the left side of the car. Makes things very difficult to get that fuel flow going, and the crews on this side of pit lane are at a serious disadvantage.
There you can see them struggling with traction as they let the car down, trying to get a little more fuel in there and having some difficulty. David Anspaugh's team gets him back out on the racetrack. These are guys that represent low-budget racing here, but what a great story is David Anspaugh.
There really is no such thing as low-budget racing in ASA. It costs a lot of money, but compared to some of the other major league types of racing, where in ASA these cars are designed to go on the short tracks, the quarter-mile and high-banked half miles, the same race car equally competitive on the 2-mile super speedways at Michigan International, where we'll race later this year, the road courses. And just kind of as a teaser, we understand the ink is still drying on a contract that will have us finishing the year on a modified oval at the site of the Landmark Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, Wednesday night, November 2nd. Are you going to be there? I'm going to be there.
I'll be there with bells on, and you will too out there in TNN viewer land. We're back under green now with the number 53 of Scott Hansen leading. Gary St. Amand trying to nudge him from behind right there, and St. Amand looking for a way around the leader, number 53, Scott Hansen.
And we'll try to get some verification from scoring. We know that Gary St. Amand is at least 1 lap down, maybe more than that, but he's a battler, and we do now get confirmation from scoring. He could be a threat before it's over, Brian. If he's able to get around Scott Hansen, that would put him back on the lead lap.
And of course, race fans know that back on the lead lap and under caution means he could run himself back around to the tail end of the field and be in contention once again in this race. So the orange and black wins number 7 of Gary St. Amand. Short-term job is to try to get around Scott Hansen. Long-term, try to work his way back through the field then if we get another yellow. We have 189 laps completed. Still Scott Hansen in the white number 53 Wisconsin Aviation Chevrolet, trying to run away with this one because the nearest car to him on the lead lap is Johnny Benson Jr., and that's 5 cars back.
Although Benson and Glenn Allen, who is in tow, have much fresher tires than do Scott Hansen. Now, if Gary St. Amand is able to get around Scott Hansen, he would repeat what he accomplished in Colorado. There's that great battle for second position as Johnny Benson goes to the high side of the lap car number 9 of Dennis Lampman.
And trying to find a way through the hole there is the number 15 of Glenn Allen. He decides wisely to get up in the slipstream and work his way around the same line as Johnny Benson Jr. And they both have now made a successful pass on the 9 car of Dennis Lampman.
Let's give you a quick rundown as we continue to watch this tussle for second position. Lead lap cars, it's Scott Hansen leading. Johnny Benson's car number 21 second. Glenn Allen runs third. They're in car number 15. Fourth is Pat Bordeaux, the rookie, in car number 44. Great run. Fifth is Mike Miller's car number 18. Sixth, Todd Forbes in 07. Running in 7th position, car number 22. That is Jay Summers. 8th, another rookie, Dave Sensipa, car number 4. 9th is Jeff Neal in car number 3. 10th is Tom Jones in 0. 11th is car number 1, Jay Sauter. And rounding out the lead lap cars, A.J. Cooper in car number 71. And Butch Miller, who came in yet again on this last caution flag in car number 52.
He just did it again, everybody. He's run you down.
Got some help this time.
Top 15. Well, we do have great scoring help here in the booth. And without them, we wouldn't be able to keep track of things quite as well as we do. 194 laps down, working our way towards the 200 lap mark. And the leader is definitely still number 53, followed by Johnny Benson Jr. and Glenn Allen Jr. A pair of juniors there, and now Glenn Allen makes the move down low on the inside to take second place away from Johnny Benson Jr., who now in turn ducks down low but finds the 26 car of Bill Baird in the way. He has to go back up high and follow Glenn Allen around the racetrack. And they're having fun out there, no doubt about it. Glenn Allen now will make the pass in car number 16, John Freeman, who had brought out a caution flag earlier when the car came to rest on the main stretch. Apparently has it going again, and Benson not able to get around as easily as Glenn Allen. And it does appear, Brian, that at this juncture, with 103 laps remaining, that Glenn Allen may have the best handling car on the racetrack. You think if we could talk to him now, he'd finally say, it's turning, guys? I think he might have finally changed his mind and been convinced after nearly 200 laps of a 300-lap race that this car will work just okay for him, maybe even better than that, as he is now seriously outdistanced Johnny Benson Jr. in that second place right now, heading towards the front. He's still got 4 cars in between him and this man, the number 53, Scott Hansen. We've got some turning around going on, some cars in the grass up on the turn 3-4 area in the racetrack. Just like that, Roger Slack brings out the caution flag. One of them headed and pointed directly towards the fence, and a few more cars coming into the pits. What a shame. That's the second-year driver, A.J. Cooper, in car number 71, who had failed to make the starting field for either the Colorado race or the Columbus race. Had just been quietly maintaining a position on the lead lap in car number 71. Was running in the 12th position right ahead of Butch Miller just before the spin. I don't know if we'll have an opportunity to see what might have happened, but for poor A.J. Cooper, it looks like the left front may be down. It's really hard to tell, but he'll bring that machine on pit road. They'll take a look and hopefully get him back in competition, as he now has gone, I believe, a second lap down to leader Scott Hansen. Well, he's the only one besides the number 22 car of Jay Summers that's gone into the pit. One of the things that we are looking at this year is a young feature situation. Here's Josh Duvall.
Hi, I'm Josh Duvall for the Young Racers. Today's question comes from Tasha Walker. She wants to know more about the ASA engines, so we asked Scott Hansen.
Thanks for writing in, Tasha. The question Tasha asked was about the 6-cylinder engines in the ASA cars. And the engines that we run in the ASA car is a 9-to-1, 274 cubic inch compression that pretty much is only used in the ASA circuits right now. Unlike other short track series that run the much larger V8s, they're limited to a compression ratio and cubic inch size. We run a 600 carburetor, which allows the engine to create about 500 horsepower out of a 6-cylinder motor yet. So it's a pretty responsive, pretty good engine. And thanks for writing in, Tasha, and back to you, Josh.
If you have a question about ASA racing, send your photograph and question to me at The Young Racers, P.O. Box 26792, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28221.
One of the young racers out there on the track right now, and not too much older than some of those writing into us, is Glenn Allen Jr. We're going to go down to the pit right now. Ralph Shaheen is with crew chief Chris Bradley.
Well, Chris, there's some conversation up in the booth about how Glenn's car is handling. How is he running right now? Is it turning for him?
Yeah, the car's working real good right now. We started out with just a little bit of a push, but the car came around to him. I think we're all set to the finish.
How do you know how much push is okay? How do you know when he's got a problem with it?
The driver has to tell you that. If you can see it from the pits, you know it's bad. But if he can just feel it, it's not that bad then. I'd like to say thanks to Randy Hostler, too, for sponsoring us for this weekend.
There's the word from Chris Bradley. At least he admits that the car is handling fairly well. Maybe Glenn Allen has told him so. We'll be back shortly here. More racing from the Glass City 300. Green just at the end of a commercial break.
We're glad you joined us here. Brian Drever along with Rob Albright and Ralph Shaheen. What a pleasure it is to be bringing you the AC-Delco Challenge Series race here, the ASA, the American Speed Association visit to the Glass City 300 at Toledo Speedway. Out in front, it's Scott Hansen, number 53. He's leading 4 now, but now Glenn Allen Jr. has only the car of number 7, Gary St. Amant, in between him and the leader. And St. Amant's trying to get around and get back on that lead lap.
And St. Amant could be in trouble. He drifted up a little bit high. Glenn Allen tucks right in underneath, and I thought Glenn would do exactly what he did. He laid back a little bit to see where Gary was going to go. As soon as St. Amant committed to the high side, he rambled right on through, and look at how quickly he's moved alongside Scott Hansen.
Glenn Allen Jr. determined to head for the front. He's got 93 laps remaining in this 300-lap event. Of course, we will finish under green, so that lap count is not an absolute given. It won't be exactly 300 laps unless we're green at the end.
And he's got to do it all over again, Brian. The last time through turn 3, he drifted up after moving aggressively alongside Scott Hansen, but boy, that car number 15 is working extremely well.
I'm going to go with Chris Bradley's opinion about how the car's handling. It is indeed working fine, just fine. And he tucks down low on that 3-4 turn area. Now he's pulled right up onto the back bumper of number 53, Scott Hansen. Number 21, Johnny Benson Jr. getting ready to challenge too. Gary St. Amant, who had an opportunity to go onto the lead lap, now has to get around 3 cars instead of 1 if he's going to do it. And pushing him, another lap car, the number 9 there of Dennis Lampman.
We had asked Chris Bradley the difference in the relationship that he has with Glenn this season and what he had with Johnny Benson in their championship year in '93. He said they're equally talented, but Glenn talks a little bit more. And look at Scott Hansen. He drove right to the bottom of the racetrack. He says, Glenn, if you're going to get it by me, you're going to have to do it up on the high side of the racetrack. And look at Allen being very aggressive.
Scott Hansen leading, Glenn Allen Jr. very aggressive racing. They say it is more blessed to give than to receive, and I think that might mean that, oh, here we go, the number 16 car, Tioga Pines number 16 back on the infield and heading for, well, that's not the racetrack, everybody. That's not a good sign. And there's Glenn Allen Jr. once again, trouble just ahead of the leaders as the number 16 car brings out a yellow flag once again here. 212 laps down, and it's John Freeman out of Indiana driving that Tioga Pines Chevrolet. He doesn't seem to have any damage. Maybe he just tucked it down into the grass again. We saw him do that once before, Rob.
We did, and Johnny Benson apparently will bring car number 21 on pit road the next time by. I'm sure Ralph will be standing by for that pit stop. That's a bit of a surprise because none of the other leaders appeared to be headed pitward. That will give him some 85 laps to work his way back through the pack, and it's going to be extremely difficult, Brian, for Benson because nobody else among the leaders appears to be coming in.
This ASA racing is tactically fascinating, and the fact that most of the pit stops are under yellow just makes it a little easier to sort out, and the damage control, at least in terms of whether to come in and pit or not, is not as serious as it might be with green flag pit stops. So Johnny Benson Jr., who appears to have all the look of a guy coming into the pits, is circling slowly towards that oval within an oval pit area. He will enter at the far end of the homestretch straightaway, then loop back around. His pit is at the end of pit road, but he gets right back on quickly. We're going to go down as Ralph Shaheen is waiting for the number 21 car to come into the pit. Ralph?
Brian, he was apparently complaining that the car was a little bit loose. Now remember, they changed left sides the first time they came in, so now they will take care of those right side tires. Remember, they said these tires were very hard, but he's been on these tires for 214 laps. Whoa, and they have a little problem. Dan Gibbs falls down. He goes over the air hose. We'll have to find out what the story is with that.
Oh my, that is definitely an infraction of ASA rules. Let's see how they decide that one, see if anybody was on site, see if that creates a problem for Johnny Benson. Of course, he's not running for points this year, but he still would like to make sure that he maintains his position on the lead lap. Some 11 cars, Brian, still running on the lead lap.
I think we have a look at just what happened there to Johnny Benson. Well, we'll have to take a look at that in a moment. Right now, though, we want to tell you, though, on August 6th, and you already know if you're a racing fan, that racing history will be made. For the first time, stock cars will race at Indy in the Brickyard 400. And if you'd like to be a part of this historic occasion, here's a chance to win 2 free tickets. Yes, that's right, 2 free tickets. Just send us a postcard with your name, address, phone number, age, and the race you are watching right now. And for those of you who lost track, it is the Glass City 300. You send it to us at Brickyard 400 Tickets. That's Post Office Box 26792, Charlotte, North Carolina 28221. If your name is drawn, you'll win 2 tickets. It's as simple as that. Don't miss this opportunity to be a part of stock car racing history. There's the address on your screen. Memorize it. Write your name, address, age, and so on, and send it right away to us.
It's going to give you a quick rundown of the cars that remain on the lead lap. Scott Hansen having some real pressure applied by Glenn Allen Jr. who rides second. Now into third position comes Mike Miller in car number 18. Running fourth is rookie Dave Sensiba in car number 4. Fifth is Todd Forbes, who finished second to Bob Seneker a year ago. Sixth is car number 3, Jeff Neal. In seventh position, car number 1, Jay Sauter. Eighth is Butch Miller in car number 52. Ninth is Pat Bordeaux's 44. 10th is the 0 of Tom Jones. In 11th position is that guy right there, Johnny Benson Jr. Was there a problem, Ralph, in terms of a rules infraction for John?
No, there's not, and here's why. Take a look at the replay. Now, you see as Dan Gibbs comes around the car, he just hooks his foot on the hose, and that's what takes him down to the ground. Because he wasn't trying to improve his position and get out early, there is no penalty to Johnny Benson Jr. It's purely an accident. ASA officials ruled on it. He's okay.
And I think that's an interesting point as we go back to green, that Rex Robbins has repeatedly said the only time we're going to impose an infraction is if it enables a guy to improve his position. And I think that's really fair, and it's going to benefit Benson as a result.
Rule number 1 in every rule book should be fair. And then if you define the rest of things in careful language, you should always go back to rule number 1, be fair. And I certainly think that ASA Racing is exactly that. Ralph Shaheen was right there. He had you with him. Johnny Benson Jr. back in the race, and no penalty will be assessed. It is still Scott Hansen, and he is being pushed and pushed hard by number 15, Glenn Allen Jr., who's trying to hold off the charge of Gary St. Amant, still struggling to get back on the lead lap so he can go racing with these guys if we come under caution again. 220 laps down, 80 laps to go.
Scott Hansen doing the classic job of mirror driving. Kind of watches to see what Glenn Allen is going to do, and since he does have the line, he does have the selection of line as the leader, he'll pick the way he wants to go. Now, Mike Miller and Glenn Allen Jr. bang together. Glenn Allen probably still has as fast a car as anybody on the racetrack, but he's gotten shuffled to the high side and dropped several positions.
Well, Glenn Allen Jr. headed for the back. Jay Sauter's in there. Mike Miller in the number 18 car has moved up into second spot. Now it is the 7 of Gary St. Amant in between Mike Miller and the leader, Scott Hansen.
Gary St. Amant now will try to do what he was unsuccessful in accomplishing a bit earlier, and that is get around Scott Hansen. He's had the advantage, Brian, of sitting back there watching to see what Hansen does when somebody tries to get around. That might enable a very smart Gary St. Amant to pick a slightly different method of trying to make the pass than did Glenn Allen.
Scott Hansen leading. Gary St. Amant a lap down. The orange number 18 of Mike Miller out of Marietta, Georgia, sitting in third spot. And Dave Sensiba in the number 4 car back there. We don't show him being down a lap, and that could very well be a super day for the young driver of number 4, one of those candidates for the Pat Schauer Memorial Rookie of the Year.
Sensiba running in third position in this race behind Scott Hansen and Mike Miller, who is in second. Third on the racetrack, but second in the running order because Gary St. Amant is 1 lap down in car number 7.
So in first place, it is Scott Hansen leading this race. Mike Miller in second, Dave Sensiba third. Ralph Shaheen is in the pit of our leader.
Danny Stillman is his crew chief. Danny, how is Scott's car handling? What's he telling you?
He says it's a little bit tight right now. It's not too bad. He likes it. We're going all the way. Hopefully we can win this thing.
Is he able to run the exact line that he wants, or is he forced to change his line to the corner?
No, we're running right on the bottom. That's where he wanted to run since we got here, so it's good.
Well, they say in some sports that turnabout is fair play. Remember back in the early going of this race when Scott Hansen uncharacteristically, and I'll say that again, uncharacteristically, because he's not a dirty driver, got into the back of Bob Seneker. Could the same thing cost Scott Hansen a little bit later? He did everything he had to do. Glenn Allen Jr., rather than cause the two of them to tangle, backed off, got to the high side, actually lost a few positions, and now is having trouble working his way back through the pack. Mike Miller, on the other hand, I think has shown at Colorado and then at Columbus, if there's anybody that's capable of running a line even lower than Scott Hansen, it would be the red Pontiac car number 18.
Well, Mike Miller discovered that he could run low in Colorado, but then he was over-geared. He had geared the car to run high and faster, but then when he was running down low, which is a shorter way around the track and slower, the motor was bogging down. He told me that after the race. So if he's going to run down low, he's got to gear the car down just a little bit. He seems to have it all worked out, and what a patient race he has done. Two veteran drivers up front. It's Scott Hansen and Mike Miller, with Gary St. Amant, one of the younger drivers, tucked in between but down a lap. Then Dave Sensiba, a rookie driver, running third, and that's evidence of what Bob Seneker said at the beginning of the broadcast. Hey, I'm not getting any younger, but the competition sure is.
And Johnny Benson back up to 7th position now, and car number 21, 7th or 8th, I'm not sure, but one of the other, as he's just made his way underneath Jeff Neal's car number 3. He was the only driver to come in under the most recent caution period, and one has to wonder, even if he's able to catch the lead cluster of cars, if he's going to be able to make any real headway.
There is Johnny Benson Jr. What a skilled driver he is, and the decision that he made, well, he's got his own idea about why he made it, but we have to go with what he has decided. Gary St. Amant now making a move, trying to get back onto the lead lap. He just briefly edged his nose out in front of Scott Hansen and does it again. So there he now tucks out into the front. Meanwhile, Scott Hansen has in his mirror once again, and if mirror driving is what he is doing, now he has the orange number 18 of Mike Miller back there in the Pontiac Motorsports Pontiac.
And I think what we may see from Mike Miller, he's an old school ASA driver, back when bumping and rubbing was maybe a little more acceptable than it is in the 90s, and I wouldn't be surprised he knows how to get that car of Scott Hansen just a little unsettled. However, to confound even our prognostications, he's trying the high side. Nobody else has made that work around Scott Hansen, and he is alongside car number 53.
Well, it's fun to watch two veteran drivers go at it like this. Scott Hansen with the low line on Mr. Inside. Mike Miller, Mr. Inside, goes outside, though, and just for the briefest of moments, gets half of his car at least ahead of Scott Hansen. Now Hansen retakes it with the shorter line around the track, but this is door-to-door racing at its very best. You won't see it any more exciting because this is for the lead.
And there's rookie Dave Sensiba moving into the fray in car number 4. The top 7 cars, Brian, right together on the racetrack. You'd think we had 2 laps to the checker.
These guys are going for it, and in fact, we have 236 laps down, so that is 64 laps. Make that 63 as they cross the finish line remaining in this race. The lead is number 53, Scott Hansen, in the white car. Then Dave Sensiba now has edged out Mike Miller. He moves into second place. Sauter making a move down on the inside is getting into contention too, and this looks like the last lap of this race. Instead, there are better than 60 to go.
Going to the high side of lap car number 26, Bill Baird. Car number 4, Dave Sensiba, nearly spinning in turn number 1. Like a veteran, gathers it in, and look at these cars, almost all of them still on the lead lap.
Well, the good news is there's not a lot of traffic in front of him. Gary St. Amant, who edged around in front of Scott Hansen, has set sail. He is on the lead lap in the tail end of the parade, but there are probably 20 or 30 car lengths of clean racetrack out in front of Scott Hansen, with Dave Sensiba pushing him hard. Sauter now sits third. Glenn Allen's right there. Butch Miller, Mike Miller, they're all around.
And we've got a spin in turn number 2. Dennis Lamont has looked at that's going to bring out a caution and should set up a shootout to the checkered flag. Brian, will anybody come on pit road? Oh my, that's going to be a tough call for crew chiefs.
Well, the patron saint of stock car racing is smiling on Gary St. Amant because he made the move to get back on the lead lap. Here comes the caution that he wanted. And while we are under caution with Dennis Lampman parked in the backstretch heading for pit row,
we're going to take another cutaway. Don't worry, you won't miss a thing. We'll be here when you get back and bring you up to date.
Miller is in here, Gary St. Amant's crew, all kinds of crew members over here trying to pick the car up. They've got it up now. Heavy damage to the rear quarter body panels. They're looking for a jack now. They got to get the tire mounted up. They got a tire for the front. Here's an air gun now from Gary St. Amant's crew. They'll get the rear on. They've got one from the front from the Baker Motorsports guys. Everybody helping Mike Miller. Boy, is he ever dejected. The car will come down now off the jack, and there goes Mike Miller with 2 tires on.
Well, what a turn of events for the number 18 car. Here is what happened as described by Ralph Shaheen. The car went out, but apparently nothing tightened up. And the crew, led by Dennis Grossnickel, not having a real good stop there. They came in for what, well, we were a little bit concerned about why they came in at this point in the race. Obviously, they wanted fresh right side rubber. We'll try to get to the bottom of it as Mike Miller goes back out, but he lost a lot of positions that he worked hard to gain. We will come right back and sort things out. It can't get any much more fun. If it can, we'll tell you about it. 55 laps remaining. The turn of events in the pit has gone down a lap. Up front, however, it is Scott Hansen in the number 53 car being challenged by Sensiba in the number 4. Jay Sauter's there, Glenn Allen's there.
And we're going back down to the pit to Ralph Shaheen for an update on the problem with Mike Miller's car.
They got the lug nuts off, but the jack didn't work, and here's why. You see this spring right here? This wouldn't go up. It didn't make the jack work. It disconnected on the back side here, so when they went to make the jack go, it just didn't go up. They yelled, no, no, no. Mike thought they said, go, 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 and he did.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, you want to not blame anybody, and that makes it real easy when it's a mechanical malfunction there and just a miscommunication. Meanwhile, Scott Hansen, look at this on the restart, about 10 car lengths over Dave Sensiba in car number 4, who was really pressing Scott just before we went to caution. Hansen's car works best right out of a yellow. Now I think Jay Sauter and Glenn Allen, Butch Miller, if they've got anything left, they've got to put the heat on that rookie driver, Dave Sensiba, who's just really running a super race to be in contention. We see that Jeff Neal has come on pit road as well in car number 3. That will be disappointing. He'll go a lap down as he had run strongly all afternoon in that Somington Windows Chevrolet.
Also tucked into the fray there is the number 84, Bob Seneker, and except for some bad luck early in the race, he might be in contention here as we wind our way into 45 laps remaining in this race. But up front, it is Scott Hansen in the white number 53, Sensiba trying to push him, but from about 5 car lengths back. And then Jay Sauter and Glenn Allen hooked up together with Butch Miller pushing them. Then it's a couple of car lengths back, and behind the lap car of Seneker is Johnny Benson Jr. So all the contenders are there as we wind our way into the last 40 laps of this race. And what a tough break for Mike Miller and his crew. I know it reminds me of the A.J. Foyt story when, what was it, a $6 part cost him an Indy 500 win. Here it was something as simple as a spring on a jack. And, well, we won't say he might have won, but he certainly was up there.
And now Dave Sensiba begins to reel in Scott Hansen as that white car number 4, the rookie piloted machine, the Lane Automotive gauge machine, is closing in. And every time we run for even so much as 8 or 10 laps under green, Brian, Scott Hansen is at a disadvantage, though he is able to keep that car right at the bottom.
He needs yellow flags at regular intervals is what you're trying to tell me in order to win this race. Because, as you say, he comes out strong right off the yellow as we go to green. But here, Dave Sensiba, Jay Sauter, Glenn Allen Jr. in particular has been very patient. His car seems to work better the further into green flag racing we go. Elucidated that at length, and now we just have to settle back and watch to see what happens along with you at home. We are now coming up on 40 laps to go in this Glass City 300-lap race at Toledo Speedway.
Butch Miller runs 5th as that battle for the lead now begins to tighten up. In 6th position is Johnny Benson. 7th is Todd Forbes. 8th and now is Pat Bordeaux, and in 9th position coming through the field is Gary St. Amant in car number 7.
All the lead cars bunched up.
And Scott Hansen is spun in turn number 3.
And he's in the wall. Glenn Allen also in the wall. Dave Sensiba is now going to inherit the lead. Jay Sauter looks like he's in 2nd spot. Butch Miller 3rd. But what a development here this late in the race. A lot of cars stacked up into the wall, but most notably the 53 of Scott Hansen, the 15 of Glenn Allen Jr.
And it happened so suddenly. Scott Hansen went very smoothly down the main stretch into turn number 3, and all of a sudden a snap spin hard into the wall. Obviously liquid on the racetrack. Glenn Allen Jr. no place to go. Johnny Benson Jr. no place to go in car number 21. And what a disappointment. With 40 laps to go in this race, it was setting up for a great shootout. I'm sure it still will be, but among fewer cars than we might have earlier anticipated. Glenn Allen was trying to get on pit road, and he did not make it. We're going to get a chance as we look at the leader. Let's see again what happened. Scott Hansen sets up just right for turn number 3, and all of a sudden it spins. I would not be surprised. I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk to Dan Stillman. Could be an engine, could be a cut-down tire. Now let's watch for Glenn Allen Jr., who was in the frame. And Ralph is standing by with the damaged car number 21 of Johnny Benson.
John, can you tell me what happened as you climbed out of the car?
I think somebody blew going in. It was just a little slippery is all, and I tried to stay out of the wall, and then there was parked cars sitting there, and I couldn't stop or go either way. So,
but you're okay?
Well, other than the car, I'm fine.
Bad news for the car, gentlemen. This is the one that John drove to the championship in '93.
See all the oil on the hood of that car. I'm not sure. You might ask him, Ralph. I don't know if you can still hear me, whether or not it was from his engine or the engine of Scott Hansen. And Scott took a hard hit, Scott Hansen, into the wall while leading this race. He's limping, and I'm sure that Ralph will track him down just as soon as possible. There he is. You can see kind of easing down the racetrack. Now, Scott, a couple of years ago, sustained a broken leg at a race in Michigan, and they say it still pains him somewhat, so I'm sure that's what he's favoring.
Well, he took a shot right there and maybe just a little bit dazed and confused. Looked like, well, now he's talking to some of the crew and some of the race track crew right here. Number 15 car of Glenn Allen Jr. What a happy face he had on this morning, even though he was a little disappointed with the way the car was handling. He can't be nearly as disappointed he is right now. And we're going to go down right now. There's Ralph Shaheen with Glenn Allen Jr.
You okay? What happened?
I really don't know what happened. I seen cars spinning, and when we backed off the gas, we hit oil or something. It was just like ice. The car just turned around backwards, and we smacked the fence. I'd like to thank Randy Hausler, Pontiac, for sponsoring us for this race. You know, we didn't have a sponsor. We came in. We're low on money, but we had a good run. We was going to finish well and keep the points going, but it's just the way of our bad luck goes.
Glenn Allen Jr. very disappointed. He came in third in points, was running second at Columbus a couple of weeks ago, decided on a late caution to come in. Unfortunately for him, nobody else did. Dropped him to about 15th in the standings. He battled back to 5th. And also for Scott Hansen, who's been so close, but without winning an ASA championship. And my, how quickly things change.
And we have a rookie driver leading this race right now. The number 4 of Dave Sensiba in the Lane Automotive Gage Motor Mall Chevrolet is out in front, inherited the race lead from the Misfortunes. Never a dull moment here at the Glass City 300, at least not so far, Rob.
And what's interesting about it is we look at car number 53, that Wisconsin Aviation Chevrolet, no $12,000 Chevy bonus from him. He was, in fact, the last rookie to win an ASA event, that coming back in 1989. Well, Ralph, a sore and shaken Scott Hansen is at your side.
How you feeling? You okay? What happened?
You remember how Mark Martin felt the other day, and he could, pretty good, you know. Somebody blew up going into 3 there, and right in the groove. There was just absolutely nothing I could do about it. Concrete's hard here at Toledo is all I can say.
No idea which car it was that let the motor go?
It was a red car. I think the red car that had the spoiler gone. I really couldn't tell you. All I could see was fluid going all the way into 3, and I tried to turn down to get to the grass of the apron, and I must have run right across it, and it just turned right around.
It's just like driving ice. There's really nothing you can do when you hit oil like that.
Absolutely nothing. I mean, when you get into it, you just want to try and let the car run as straight as you can and free as you can. And like I said, I was arcing the car real high off the wall down into the bottom. I must have run right through the middle of it, right across it, and just turned around. There's nothing I could do.
Brian, we're going to come back, I think, and hopefully find that mystery car that let go in front of Scott. We thought it was his machine. Obviously not.
Well, the good news is everybody's okay. The bad news is some of the contenders are now out of contention. They'll have to watch the finish of the Glass City 300 along with you, and we'll have it for you the last 35 laps when we come back. Chevrolet, there's the damaged car of Hansen, who said he got into some fluid or something on the track. The back end went away, and here is what happened.
Now, see the left side of the screen. I don't know. We had one alert cameraman. You could see right there, just in the right side, a car down at the bottom. I believe that it's Joe Knott's car number 48. Ralph, can you confirm that for us?
Yeah, Rob, as you can see, red car, no spoiler, just like Scott Hansen said. But here's why. See this silver canister back here? That's the power steering unit. Take a look at the big hole blown right through the side of it. It was power steering fluid on the racetrack.
Wow.
That's just a kind of oil. For those of you that know, it's a very thin, sort of reddish looking oil. Power steering, automatic transmission fluid, whatever you want to call it, is my recollection that's what's on there. In any case, Scott Hansen went for a little ice skating ride into the concrete there, and we are getting ready to go back to racing as soon as possible. The track crew, of course, has done their best to clean this track up. Dave Sensiba, the rookie driver, number 4, is in first place. In second spot, it looks like the number 1 car of Jay Sauter, the KC Motorsports Pontiac. And things are changed, and changed in a big way here, Rob Albright, as we look at the last 30 laps of racing when we go green, if we can, here quickly.
And suddenly only 7 cars remaining on the lead lap. They are Dave Sensiba, who will now run to the checker without another pit stop. Jay Sauter did not appear to have the machinery to even stay up with Sensiba, so it'll get interesting. Butch Miller, who runs in third, will have to hustle and get around Jay as quickly as possible. In fourth position now comes Todd Forbes in 07. Running in fifth spot is car number 0, Tom Jones. Also remaining on the lead lap, now Gary St. Amant. Remember how he battled back onto that lead file a bit earlier? He's deep in the pack, but he is still on the lead lap. And the last car on the lead lap, all the way at the end of the file, is the number 44 of Pat Bordeaux. So looking at this roster of 7 drivers, we still have 2 rookies bracketing that top 7. Leader Dave Sensiba, 7th place, car number 44, Pat Bordeaux.
Ralph Shaheen and his infield crew in a track meet down there. Racing Electronics, the official supplier of communications equipment to the American Speed Association, is also giving you an opportunity. This one is to feel like you're part of the team.
And Rob and I will be drawing the name of one lucky race fan during each of the remaining ASA races televised here on TNN. The winner will receive a Uniden Bearcat scanner from Racing Electronics along with a 1-year Racers Frequency membership. And to enter that, send your name and address on a postcard to Racing Electronics, Box GFS, 8701 Mallard Creek Road in Charlotte, North Carolina, 28262. And you can listen in on all the pit crews.
And while you're writing, why not get out a pencil and paper and write to TNN in Nashville, Tennessee? They're easy to find just by calling directory assistance, or ASA in Pendleton, Indiana, or Group 5 Sports in Charlotte, North Carolina. Let us know what you think. And Brian, I think I speak for both of us when I say when you come to an ASA race, it's friendly faces everywhere. It's easy to get in the pit area. It's easy to mingle and mix with the fans. And we love hearing from you. Even if you got a comment like that guy that tracked us down at 8 o'clock yesterday morning and said, you guys don't do enough of this. That's what we need to hear, because we're always trying to improve. We want to be the best. I think Dan Duvall, president of Group 5, says, be the best and work like you're at the bottom of the heap, and you will succeed. And I agree with that. So race fans, we got to hear from you. We need to know what you think.
Well, we've made some changes, and I'm the new guy. I especially would like to hear from racing fans out there. And we want to give you what you want to see. ASA Racing and the AC-Delco Challenge Series is all about fans. That's why we've done some of the things that we do, not only in the broadcast, but in the racing rules. And, well, Rob said it all. Let us know what you think, either in person at one of the events or by mail. Call us up, whatever you like.
And we've talked enough. I think it's time to let the race drivers do the talking.
Well, we've been ticking off the laps here. We're down at 28 laps to go, and we go green. Dave Sensiba. We've got a story brewing right here as he's riding ahead of the #1 car of Jay Sauter out of West Salem, Wisconsin. And in third spot is the 52 of Butch Miller, who has been stalking the field, staying out of trouble, staying out of the spotlight. And a patient man, well, that just might be the guy that wins this race.
Well, you saw Dave Sensiba electing a relatively slow pace on the restart. He's never led a race back to green from caution in ASA, and I'm sure he wanted to do things just right. ASA officials painted a red mark on the wall in turn 4, and that's exactly where he picked up the throttle.
Dave Sensiba leads. Jay Sauter challenging. Bob Seneca in the Bluebird down a lap, also right in the middle of the fray. Then it's Butch Miller in the 07 car. Behind Butch is Todd Forbes.
And the yellow is out again, Brian. Looking around the racetrack, don't see any particular cause, though. Apparently debris has been dropped off one of the race cars, and an official is running right out by the start-finish line to pick it up. So we should be cautioned for just a very brief period.
Well, there's no surprise that there's some loose parts flopping around off of some of these cars, and as the track crew goes out to take a look, right there on the victory circle stands one of the members of the track crew, and we've got some stuff on the track. Apparently Roger Slack up there in the flag, they're looking at it. It's right up against the wall, apparently, is where we have some debris on the racetrack. So Dave Sensiba's lead in this race under green was short-lived so far anyway, and what a thrill it must be for one of those Rookie of the Year candidate drivers.
And I'm sure had you taken a poll of all the fans that packed these grandstands today and said who's going to win this race, maybe only Dave Sensiba's girlfriend would have said David's going to win today. And there's that piece of whatever out on the race course.
Well, and here's a look at how it got there, as now it's been removed. We've got pieces and parts flopping around out there. Not sure just exactly what that was, but here it comes tumbling right at you.
Boy, that cameraman that operates that camera is a brave soul, isn't he? Oh, wait a minute. That's mounted to the wall. I'm sorry.
Bolted on the wall, never talks back to the director in the truck, and
unlike us, right?
Never gripes about his pay either.
Well, what you race fans don't realize is our producer and director, Gary Clem and Joel McKee, constantly keeping us in line here in the booth, and I think they do a pretty good job. Sometimes it's a little bit distracting when we're trying to talk about one thing, but they keep us well in line up here in the booth, no doubt about it.
A lot of information flying around out there. We just hope that we're getting as much of it as we can. They're certainly feeding it to us, and that we're transmitting it to you. And we're going to go green. We're looking at 277 laps down, scheduled for 300. But remember, we will race a minimum of 5 green laps at the end of this competition. Roger Slack's got the flag going again. And Dave Sensiba sees it up front. And 278 just went by as they came past. Dave Sensiba leads. The rookie driver, Jay Sauter in the #1 car, sits in second spot. Butch Miller a third on the board, but fourth on the racetrack because Bob Seneca in the Bluebird #84
down a lap. It's tucked right into the lead train.
And if Jay Sauter is going to get by, he needs to do it very quickly, because Sensiba's car gets better under green. Jay seems to go away, and that is exactly what Jay Sauter will try to do, Brian, in turn 3.
Butch Miller's pushed down underneath Bob Seneker, so he's tucked right on the back bumper of Sauter's car. Dave Sensiba, whoa, a little squirrely coming out of turn 4, tucks in tight down on that low inside line. And Mike Miller is also back in the picture, although he's down a lap. Tom Jones, the Zero Hero, is in contention. They're still on the lead lap. And we've got a heck of a race starting to wind down. 20 laps remaining.
This is vintage Butch Miller. I don't know if he's got enough race car in that Ford Quality Care Ford Thunderbird to get around the 2 Chevys, or the Chevy and the Pontiac, occupying positions in front of him. And here comes Jay Sauter to the low side in turn 3.
Jay Sauter taking a look down low. Sensiba gave him a little bit of room. Sauter gives him a little bit of a tap there. And Sensiba's loose all over the home stretch. He's in the wall. Jay Sauter goes by. Some parts are flying off of Sensiba's car. And the rookie driver has just been tapped into the wall there, and his car is no longer going to be in contention. Jay Sauter and Butch Miller are now the guys up front.
Oh my goodness, what a disappointment for Dave Sensiba in car number 4. And since that was a battle for the lead, I'm sure we're going to have it from 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 different angles and get another shot at it. Now, Jay Sauter had told us at the beginning of the season that over the last couple of years, he's taken a lot of hits from behind, and he wasn't going to get pushed around anymore. Well, let's see what happens. You can see that Sensiba's car is already rocking back and forth. It's already out of shape. I don't know. I think Sauter's just looking for a place to go. You know, at first I thought maybe Jay was a little over-aggressive, but I think he saw that Dave Sensiba was a little out of shape and just was trying to go to the bottom and make sure that he didn't get into the wall. Let's look from another angle. There's Sensiba. He's already rocking back and forth. You can see it. Dave's trying to gather it in, and Jay simply had no place to go, and that camera angle really confirms that.
Well, I think we said it there because Dave Sensiba, when we were calling it live, was a little squirrely coming out of the turn. There was no contact, and I agree with you totally there, as little as I know. Looking at him, and Jay Sauter was just trying to get out of trouble because inertia, being what it is, would take Sensiba's car up.
And we'll just have to get a reaction from Dave Sensiba. But what a wonderful young man he is. I mean, he is genuinely a nice guy. He spent a lot of time working in the Troop Motorsports stables with Glenn Allen Jr. I'm sure he would credit a lot of his success to that. Dave has been a real threat at Berlin Raceway in Marne, Michigan. Ralph, he's got to be one unhappy young rookie driver.
Well, nobody saw it better than you. What happened out there?
Well, we were holding the bottom. I was giving him all the outside he wanted. He got into me going in and just never let off all the way around 3 and 4.
So would you say it's just good, clean racing, or a little bit more than that?
Oh, I think it's a little bit more than that. I was giving him the whole outside lane that was there for him. All he had to do was take it.
Well, Dave, I know you're frustrated right now, but a tremendous effort and a fantastic drive today by Dave Sensiba right to the finish.
Brian, you weren't here last year, but here it is again. Reminds me so much of an interview with Jay Sauter at the opening race of 1993 after being tapped from behind by Mike Eddy in a very similar looking situation. Now we're going to get at least one more view, this one from the fan cam. Watch them coming out of turn number 4.
Well, it's not as definitive as that straight-on look we had before there. Sensiba a little loose coming out of the turn. Jay Sauter looking for somewhere to go. Jay Sauter, a guy who said at the beginning of this season he wasn't going to get pushed around by anybody anymore.
And looking at it from Dave Sensiba's point of view, he felt the tap. He did get tapped, there's no doubt about it, but Dave has not yet had the benefit of looking at the many angles that we have. Again, he got some help, there's no doubt about it, but I think that Jay was trying to avoid spinning him. Well, one guy that can maybe help answer that is the car owner of Jay Sauter's car number 1, and Ralph is with him.
Chris, what is Jay saying to you about the incident? How did he describe it?
Well, Jay said he was going for the same spot that the Sensiba car was going after, and he just held his line, and it was a racing accident.
2 sides to every story.
Well, we'll come back and continue racing here in the Glass City 300. We're going to take a real quick pause right now. When we come back, the green flag will be out, we hope, and you'll be with us. 10 laps remaining in the Glass City 300. And if Jay Sauter, who had said he wasn't going to get pushed around anymore, was right, well, the guy that just may be doing the pushing is Butch Miller.
It's Pontiac and Ford running 1-2.
Here's
Jay
what Sauter
Sauter
had to
and
say.
Butch Miller.
Jay Sauter, we asked him about it. He says no more Mr. Nice Guy. And at the beginning of the season, he had a new philosophy about just what was going to happen if he got into the lead.
I think we're going to try not to get pushed around so much. I think the time has come that when someone leans on me, I'm going to lean back, and maybe that's been one of my bigger problems, and we're going to work on that real hard.
Well, we're not sure if that was a push or just two guys trying to find the same space on the racetrack. That was at least the version given by Jay Sauter's car owner. Dave Sensiba had a different view. You decide for yourself. We gave you plenty of looks at it. Right now, though, with 7 laps
and a hard crash in turn number 4. A couple of cars. Harold Fair, with a very sore foot, has had a problem. He's tangled with Jay Summers in car number 22. And unfortunately, this is turning into a crash fest near the end of this race. That one well deep in the pack among guys not even on the lead lap.
Well, we had plenty of incidents early in the race. We had some very telling incidents late in the race. And now, with just 6 laps showing on the board left in the Glass City 300, we've got another car into the wall. Damaged cars all over the racetrack. Here comes the 98 car of Gordy Brunette without the right rear tire. He gets into the pit anyway. The tire is following him down the straightaway, and it's coming right at you here. It looks like it's going to get out of the way down into the infield. Lots of stuff going on here at the Glass City 300. The AC-Delco Challenge Series has been action-packed and full of excitement here. I think you would have to agree.
Well, Harold Fair getting some help out of the race car. Let's see how much we can see of what actually transpired. There you can see car number, I don't know, Harold Fair just a victim of circumstance. Gordy Brunette, I think the wheel was coming off, and Brian Reffner got into him in car number 5. I'm almost certain that's what might have happened. And Harold Fair simply no chance to avoid problems. He's out of the car, but he's a hurting fellow right now. The man who has several ASA victories to his career. None of them have come over the last couple of seasons. Was runner-up for the championship in 1990 and hasn't had a really great year since then.
We saw his son racing here last night in a super late model event, Saturday night, part of the Saturday night program at Toledo Speedway. But Harold Fair Sr. taking his helmet off, sitting on the wall, and his day has ended so close and yet so far from the end of this race.
Well, I talked with Harold this morning. He said that foot was really hurting him. 3rd-degree burns. It had apparently gotten some infection. Harold has been a real stalwart of ASA since joining the series as a rookie back in 1980.
Well, his problem came, of course, in Colorado and the Total Motor Oil race up there, as apparently raw fuel had dripped onto him. They had a fuel leak. The carburetor, one of the floats stuck open, and some raw fuel went onto his feet. I don't know if they were actually on fire, but that race fuel will burn you if it gets on your skin. He had to drive the rest of the race with some sore feet. One of them continues to bother him. He's been limping around here, but a game and veteran driver, Harold Fair, being helped into the ambulance, certainly just to check him out, and it looks like the car doctors are going to have some serious work to do on that number 81.
It's a good thing these guys are going to have a week off. Let's take another look as Harold Fair took a nearly head-on ride into the wall. Now watch coming out of turn number 4. You can see the car at the head of the pack is Gordy Brunette's car number 98, very much off the pace. And Harold Fair, it looked like, got into car number 5, Brian Reffner. But again, this is one of those incidents completely beyond anybody's ability to predict or control, as apparently Gordy Brunette simply lost a wheel. He was able to drive on around the racetrack and replace that errant wheel.
Well, the wheel has parked itself down in the infield. They've recovered it. And the number 81 car of Harold Fair is not faring too well. In turn, of course, number 22, Jay Summers, who has been involved in a couple of altercations here today, got into Harold Fair's car, and Summers is trying to return to the race. At least he's still rolling.
It's been a great race, but it's also been a caution-plagued race. 16 periods of yellow for a total of 98 laps. 5 of those cautions have come in the last 50 laps of this race. Now, in true ASA fashion, unlike other major league sanctioning bodies, we will not finish a race, Brian, under caution. We run to green. We've reached lap 295. We will hold the count until we go back to green flag racing. So Jay Sauter is not going to coast to a victory, nor is he going to have that complacency factor set in and drive off the racetrack with just 1 lap to go, as we saw the hapless Mark Martin do earlier. And you can see how that can happen. You simply lose concentration when you think it's over and you think you've got it won. Meanwhile, Jay Sauter, Butch Miller, and Todd Forbes, who run 1, 2, 3, now are kind of, I mean, they're more focused than they've been all afternoon, trying to develop a strategy for the last few laps.
Jay Sauter's car has got a little scuffage on the outside right side door there. On the other hand, Butch Miller in 2nd spot. His car looks just about like it did when it rolled out of the trailer this morning. The 07 of Todd Forbes also in pretty good shape. Here's the 02 car
and that is Randy Larson in the Tony's Pizza Pabst General Draft Chevrolet. He got into the tail end of the field. Well, he's still running, folks, and a lot of guys are in the trailers, in the pits, and on the wall watching.
There's Todd Forbes in that Noah Yoder entry. He's had a great day. He finished runner-up and a great finish 2 years ago to Bob Senecker. Stole a Realty, I think, also on that car in Ramada for this weekend. He's kind of interesting. They go wherever they go. Now, this is kind of home for him, but everywhere they go, they find a motel. They'll give him some free rooms and put their name on the race car. That's pretty good salesmanship. There's Tony Roper. I don't know who he's waving at. He's got a glove off of his left hand. And that car was so embattled, I didn't think after its second collision of the day that it had any lives left. But he's managed to motor around on the racetrack.
Well, maybe he's just happy to still be moving out there with a car that's heavily damaged as it is. We have to also take a look there at Sauter trying to warm his tires up or keep them warm. Butch Miller doing the same thing. Once again, we're going to go down to Ralph Shaheen, who's really been in a track meet, as we've said before. It looks like he's standing still for the moment, though.
The ambulance you see over me is where Harold Fair is right now. Now, I had a chance to talk to Harold Fair Jr., his son and crew chief. He is fine. The only problem is he irritated the already burned feet. He slammed his feet hard into the floorboards when he went into the wall. He should be okay. Now, take a look at this. These are not okay. This is what a rear-end gear normally looks like. This is the one that was burned out of Jay Summers' car because there was no oil in the back of the gear casing. And that's what caused the car to catch on fire. It was dripping gear out of there, oil out of there, and it lit on fire. Look at this. It is melted all the way to the ground. It is still warm to the touch. It's been out of the car for quite a while.
Well, it took Ralph Shaheen a little while to get to the bottom of the Pontiac Flambe that we saw earlier in the race, the number 22 of Jay Summers spitting fire out of the back. Now we know exactly why. And it seemed to have gone away all by itself, but the fact is the rear end burned up there, and, well, you saw it.
Here's the top 10 as they're running with 5 drivers on the lead lap and still with a shot, though I think it's going to be settled among the top 3. Butch Miller leads. Todd Forbes runs second. Tom Jones runs in third position. Fourth spot is car number 7, Gary St. Amant. Fifth is car number 44, Pat Bordeaux. Sixth position is car number 18, Mike Miller. Remember when he lost those wheels? He's sixth, 1 lap down. In seventh position, Brad Loney. He went a lap down early and has run well ever since that time. Eighth is Kent Stauffer. His just typical yeoman job, 1 lap off the pace. Ninth, 2 laps down, car number 5, Brian Refner. And in 10th, the guy who triggered that most recent melee with that lost left rear wheel is Gordy Brunette's car number 98. And I think he's now the leading, well, no, he's the second running rookie in this race with Pat Bordeaux, who made a debut. And again, we just want to remind you race fans, don't go anywhere, Brian, because we will finish this race under green. If it takes the next 20 minutes, we do not enter under caution.
And what you're saying then is there are 5 cars on the lead lap, led by number 52, Butch Miller, led by number 1, Jay Sauter. We're going to go once again down to Ralph Shaheen. What do you have for us, Ralph?
Well, I got Mike Chappie, Jay Sauter's crew chief. What is Jay saying to you from inside the car? How is he planning on holding off Butch and the rest?
Well, we're just going to try to run our line, try to get in the corner easy and keep it on the bottom. And the car's been getting off the corner super all day long. And we got a great motor from Carl Wagner. It pulls so good up off the corner. The bottom is just like gold here. And if you can keep the car there, you're in pretty good shape.
Did he say anything to you in particular about the incident when Sensipa? Was the car loose or pushing at all?
No, he didn't say a word. Obviously we were trying to get up underneath him, and it looked to me like going into 3, he was under him. Then I couldn't see because of the Goodyear truck, and we were definitely under him coming off the corner.
Mike Chappie, as they get ready for the 5-lap sprint.
Well, I'd kind of like to hear all the conversations that are going to eventuate on pit road when this whole thing is over, because it has been just, tangle after tangle this afternoon. I think I said Butch Miller was leading this race. Butch Miller would like to be leading this race 5 laps from now, and he's still got to get by Jay Sauter, who's crew chief we just talked with. And we also took a peek just before Ralph interviewed him. We saw a couple of gals walking off. One of them was the rather distraught wife of Harold Fair, though I think Harold's going to be just fine.
We hope that everybody is going to be just fine. It certainly might have taken a few years off the lives of some of the crews down there, off some of the drivers. It has not been an uneventful Glass City 300. In fact, it has been action-packed, and that is really what short track and ASA AC-Delco Challenge racing is all about. We don't mean in the way that cars have been strewing themselves around the racetrack, but we have had no lack of action here in this race. We will finish with 5 laps of green flag racing. Jay Sauter in the number 1 car will be the front runner ahead of Butch Miller ahead of the number 07 car of Todd Forbes, and also the 0 car there of Tom Jones, the 0 hero. And there are 6 cars on the lead lap right now, moving back to number 44.
Pat Bordeaux. The green flag is out. We are racing. It's a sprint to the finish. It's like a trophy dash here now, Rob Albright. We've got 2:95 in the book, and it's only 5 laps that are going to decide this race.
Butch Miller and the Ford of Todd Forbes, a pair of Fords running second and third. It is car number 1, Jay Sauter, trying to make it back-to-back wins for Pontiac and a $4,000 bonus. Chevy's no longer a factor here this afternoon, though they led much of the race, and here comes Miller to challenge for the lead.
Butch Miller tucks the nose inside the left rear quarter panel of Jay Sauter and can't make it stick. Yes, now he gets the whole car underneath. Sauter trying to go by outside and stay on the high line, but Butch Miller making that low inside line work, looking for an opportunity. And
I just start saying for the first time today, black paint all over the right front fender of Butch Miller's white Ford.
Well, he's touching stuff around the racetrack that he stayed away from so far here today. There's a little bump, and trying to open up the bump and run move perhaps on Jay Sauter. Sauter holding him off, though. We are down to 2 laps remaining in the Glass City 300. Butch Miller making a run for it with Jay Sauter in the front row seat, running in 3rd spot right now, the 07 of Todd Forbes in the Ramada Stolen Realty Ford. Here they come around for the white flag. It's 1 lap to go. It's still Sauter, Miller, and Forbes in that order.
What line is Jay Sauter going to choose this time going down the backstretch? Again, Miller makes the bump, and again he gets a fender alongside. Jay is fighting for all he's worth to hold him off. Bring him home, Brian.
Here we go. Butch Miller has made the move on the inside, and it looked like Jay Sauter might have blinked. It's going to be close. Oh, no more than the distance from the front wheel to the nose of the car. Butch Miller had kept that car looking nice and clean until he had to start moving around, and he has apparently taken the checkered flag. Butch Miller in the 52 car, the Liberty Ford,
picks up his 2nd win of the 1994 season. Jay Sauter in the runner-up spot, and we'll be back to talk to the winners. I think you'll agree it was a very exciting ASA Glass City 300. Don't go anywhere. We'll wrap it up. Tell you what, our hearts are still pounding, but while they are, let's go down to Ralph Shaheen, who is with a very happy Butch Miller.
Boy, we're making a habit out of this on TV. Tell me about that last lap. How'd you make the move?
Well, you know, that's not typical Butch Miller, what we just saw right there, you know. Once in a while, you know, David Sensiba's a good friend of mine, and he lost the lead a certain direction, and that's not the way I like to take the lead, but sometimes it needs to be done that way.
Interesting comment from Butch Miller. Now we want to hear from Jay Sauter over here. We've got to catch up with Jay real quick to find out what the story was. Jay, tell me about that incident out there with Sensiba and then Butch Miller. A lot of conversations about this. What's your viewpoint?
Well, I just got under Sensiba clean and put a good pass on him. He tried to pinch me a little bit, and we made it through, and he didn't. The team did an excellent job today. You know, I can't thank Wagner Racing Engines and Howe Chassis and Chris Weiss and all them enough. Butch did what he had to do to win the race, and when it's the other way around, I'll have to do what I have to do to win the race.
Okay, now you made that comment earlier this year. Was that the style you were living up to today, or is that just the way the game was played today?
We came to win, not finish second.
Jay Sauter.
Where is that smile that we've come to expect from Jay Sauter? Man, you're not going to want to miss one.
Well, it's not all fun and games out here. It's very serious indeed. These guys are kind to one another until it counts. Butch Miller taking the win there ahead of Jay Sauter, Todd Forbes. Here's the bottom half of the top 10. Great job by all these guys. A lot by Butch Miller in that number 52 car, and no more than a bare blink of an eye between first and second place.